The first letter arrived on a Monday. Chris Callaway was annoyed when her secretary told her it had been in the mailbox. It was unstamped. The tone was friendly, not too worshipful, not too familiar. Dear Ms. Callaway, your work has given me such a lot of pleasure that I felt I had to write to you. Somehow I had missed your films until last week when I saw Heart of Stone on late-night television. I was so impressed that I saw Valiant Days in Westwood the following night. I have since rented videos of Mainline and Downer, and I was impressed with your very high standard of work in all of them. Have you ever had the experience of meeting someone and feeling that you had known him for a long time? I had that feeling about you. Thank you again for your fine work. You'll be hearing from me. Admirer. When Chris had bought this house, she had taken a lot of trouble to keep the address strictly private. She handed the letter back to Melanie, her part-time secretary. Answer it cordially and refer him to the box number. There's no return address, Melanie said, turning over the envelope. Then call the security patrol and ask them to keep a watch on my mailbox. Melanie gave her the you can't be serious look. Chris, don't you think you're overreacting? It's a letter, not a bomb. Chris laughed. You're right. Jesus, she thought, why am I letting a little thing like this get to me? Melanie glanced at her watch. You're due at Graham Hong's in 20 minutes for your class, and Danny's doing your hair here at 1. Right, I'd better get going. A moment later, she was driving down Stone Canyon past the Bel Air Hotel towards sunset in the Mercedes 500 SL convertible. Graham Hong turned out to be big for an Asian, over 6 feet and well-muscled, yet lithe. He taught in his home, and it was nothing like a gym, more of a tea house. Hong greeted Chris with a cup of tea and asked her to sit down. Have you ever had any martial arts training, he asked. None, she replied. First, then, some basics, Hong said. Let's say that you find yourself in a fight with a man who was larger and heavier than you. How would you approach this fight? I'd kick him in the crotch, Chris replied. Or you might have more success kicking him in the shin, or better, the knee. The idea is to inflict as much pain as possible with your first strike. It is the pain that is disabling. There is nothing in the testicles that is inherently disabling. If you're wearing hard shoes, you can inflict disabling or at least very distracting pain in the shin. But if you kick in the knee, you can actually disable, even while barefoot or wearing soft shoes. Very interesting, Chris said. Hong took her by the shoulders and stood her in the center of the room. Relaxed, weight on both feet, slightly forward, arms at the sides. This is the position from which to either attack or defend. Watch. This is slow motion. Hong stood facing her, lifted his left foot, and gently pushed against the inside of her right knee. It buckled, and she fell to that knee. Hong helped her up. Now, you try, in slow motion. Simply put your left instep to the inside of my right knee. Chris followed his instructions, and Hong fell to his knee. Now, he said from the floor, this is what you have done. First, if you have kicked me really hard, you have damaged my knee, perhaps so badly that I can't walk on it again without surgery. Second, because you have buckled the joint and made me fall, I am on one knee and vulnerable to further attack. Gotcha, Chris said. When Chris got home, there was another unstamped letter in the mailbox. Look at this, Chris said, handing Danny DeVere the 2 letters. Can you believe it? Danny was brushing Chris's thick brunette hair, shaping it around her shoulders. He put down his hairdryer and picked up a letter. Well, sweets, he said, looks like you got yourself a fella. Not that one, Chris said. Read the second one. Danny read the second letter and quoted, You're certainly athletic. I'd hate to come up against you in a dark alley. What the hell does that mean? I just came back from Graham Hong's house. He's training me for the new film. Danny hooted. God, I'd have given anything to see that. The point is, Danny, whoever wrote this letter saw it. The son of a bitch followed me this morning. Danny took her head in his hands and pointed it at the mirror. Look at me, he said. Don't do this to yourself. You're starting a new movie next Monday, and you can't get yourself all tensed up about something that you're probably imagining. Chris stood up and glanced at her hair in the mirror. Enough of this. I've got to meet the security system guy at the new house in half an hour, and with traffic, I'll be lucky to make it. Boy, is that guy going to do a job on you today, Danny said. You'll buy the biggest alarm system in the world. You won't be able to get into your own house. Oh, shut up, she said, grabbing his hand. Come on, I'll walk with you to your car. She led him out of the house to the little red Miata parked in her drive, then kissed him on the cheek. Dinner this weekend? I got a hot new fella to see on Saturday, he said. How about Sunday? You're on. I'll take you out to Malibu and show you how the house is coming. Then we'll have dinner at La Scala. Sounds good. See you Sunday, she called over her shoulder. She got into the Mercedes and headed for the freeway. She drove fast, her new hairdo blowing in the wind. At 22, Chris had headed for New York, straight out of the University of Georgia, a B.A. with a double major in dance and drama tucked in her trunk. She got her first job a week later in an off-Broadway musical, and she had hardly ever been out of work since. There had been a 2-year marriage to an actor, Brad Donner, and together they had scraped up a down payment on the Bel Air house. When the marriage failed, he did the gentlemanly thing and moved out, but she was uncomfortable living in the house, and she looked forward to selling it when her own house was finished and splitting what should be a considerable profit with Brad. Chris was not a bankable movie star. Not yet, anyway. But she'd played featured parts in films with Gene Hackman, Dustin Hoffman, and Alec Baldwin, and 2 leads opposite slightly lesser stars. Her price was $500,000 now, and a hot starring role would push it over the $1 million mark. She was 31, too old to be the kind of phenomenon Julia Roberts was, but she had a solid track record, and she was consistently considered for some of the best work in town. The new house was at Big Rock, not necessarily the most fashionable part of Malibu, but the beach was great, and the lot was good. As she approached Big Rock, she could see the framing timbers of the roof above the construction fence. When the house was near completion, she would build a wall that would separate her from the Pacific Coast Highway traffic and from adoring nuts like her new letter writer. As she parked, a van pulled up behind her, and a young man got out. "Miss Callaway," he said, "I'm Mel Parker, Keyhole Security." "How do you do, Mel?" She shook his hand. He was nice-looking, she thought. Blonde, wiry, and athletic-looking. He had a scarred upper lip and hooded eyes, but the effect was not unattractive. "I'm a real big fan of yours," Mel said. "Seen everything you've done, and I can't wait for the next one." "Thank you, Mel. I appreciate that." He blushed. "Shall we take a walk around your place and see what you need in the way of a security system?" "Sure." The house was framed, and she could see the shape that she had dreamed about. Walk through the rooms and feel their size, pick her way among the timbers, out onto what would be the deck, and gaze at the blue Pacific. As she and Mel entered, another young man, a stranger, approached. He was wearing work clothes and carrying a clipboard. He stuck out his hand. "Chris, I'm Bud Carson. I'm your framing contractor." "Hi," she said, not put off by the use of her first name. The whole world seemed to have that privilege these days. Her general contractor, Mike Moskowitz, had introduced her to most of the subcontractors, but not to this one, who looked awfully young to be the boss of the framers. He also had an odd cast in his eyes, which made it difficult to tell where he was looking when he spoke. "How do you like the way the place is shaping up?" he asked. "I'm thrilled. It's beginning to look the way I've imagined it would." Framing's the best part," Bud said. "That's when a project starts to be a house. We'll have the house clad in another 10 days and the roof on a week after that." "Great. You keep up the good work here. Now, if you'll excuse me, I got to talk with this gentleman about the alarm system." By the way," Carson said, "I don't have any paper with me right now, but some other time when you're out here, do you think you could give me your autograph?" "Sure, Bud, I'd be glad to." She turned to go. "And can I get somebody to take your picture with me?" This was the part of her life that drove her nuts. She tried to keep her voice pleasant. "If I have time. Now you're going to have to excuse me." She turned and walked away. "Chris!" he called after her. She ignored him and kept going. She spent an hour walking around the house with Mel, pointing out windows, deciding whether to have window or screen alarms, placing the keypads that would allow her to enter an entry code or push the panic button. When she got back to the house, there was another letter in her mailbox that made 3 in one day. "I can't seem to stop thinking about you," the last line read. On Friday morning, Chris attended the first reading of the final script of her new film, Forsaken, her first Western. This was not the hot role she was looking for, but she was playing opposite Jason Quinn, a rising young actor, and the word was this movie would make him a big star. Once again, she was riding on somebody else's coattails, but though Quinn's role would dominate the film, she had 4 very good scenes, including a fight scene. When they finished, Jason Quinn and the director, Brent Williams, took her aside, which made her nervous. Like any actor, Chris could be rattled by criticism, and she knew that if these 2 men didn't like what she was doing, she could be replaced on short notice. "Chris," Brent began, "I want to tell you that this was the best first reading of a script that I have ever attended, and Jason and I think you are going to be brilliant in this film." Chris had learned, from experience, not to get too excited about promises in Hollywood, but this time she couldn't help herself. Her heart was thumping with joy. On Sunday night, Danny DeVere showed up on time. Danny, Chris reflected, was always on time. It was reassuring to have someone in her life who was entirely predictable. Danny did her hair every day when she was working and twice a week when she wasn't. So, along with Melanie, her secretary, he was a constant in her life, a fount of common sense and good judgment. She told him about the first reading and what had happened afterward. "Sweets," Danny said, "I'm 40, and I've been in this town since I was 22, so I know what I'm talking about. You are headed for the big time, and nobody can stop you." They dined at La Scala and talked the way old friends do. Chris hadn't been dating since the divorce, and she enjoyed the lack of complication in her friendship with Danny. She trusted him completely. Later, they drove back through Malibu to Big Rock, named for the geological formation that loomed over the highway. Chris parked at the gate and worked the combination lock that secured it. Then they stepped past the fence and arrived at the front door. "Wow," Danny said reverently. "It's real, isn't it?" "It's getting that way." Chris led him down the hallway that ran straight through the house, then to the right and into the living room, taking care not to trip over debris. She led him back to the wide doorway. "There'll be double doors here, and this is my bedroom. The big opening there will be French doors leading out to the deck. Come on, you've got to see the view." Chris led the way along a catwalk of planks. "Be careful there!" Danny shouted. "It's a long way down, and there are rocks at the bottom." "Don't worry, I'm a regular tightrope walker," Chris called back. She pointed at the moon over the ocean. "Isn't that a gorgeous sight?" She jumped up and down on the plank, steadying herself against a 2x4. "Stop that! You're scaring me!" Danny called. Chris gave one last jump, and as she landed, she heard a sharp crack and felt the plank give way. She tightened her grip on the 2x4 and tried to turn and reach it with her other hand, but the plank had parted and she was falling. She couldn't keep her grip. 20 feet separated her from the beach, and the fall seemed to be in slow motion. "Please, God," she was thinking, "let there be sand below me." She fell, and when she struck the beach, only part of it was sand. She was lying on her back, and under her head were rocks. The pain was so intense that only unconsciousness could stop it. As she passed out, she heard from somewhere above her Danny's voice, frantic, calling her name. The pain had stopped, but it began again. Chris sucked in a deep breath, and when it escaped, an involuntary moan went with it. "You're awake, are you?" a soft male voice said. "I'm afraid to open my eyes," she said. "It hurts so." "Will you try something for me? You don't have to open your eyes." A large hand took hers. "Will you wiggle your fingers?" She wiggled them. "Good." The hand took her other one. Now this one. She wiggled the other fingers. Now wiggle your toes. She wiggled them, and then she heard a sigh. Good girl, the man said. Oh, you had me worried for a while there. What was the last thing you remember? Having dinner with Danny. Good. Not much memory loss. You'll be fine. Where is Danny? He's been in and out of here since day before yesterday. What's today? Tuesday. I remember Sunday. We had dinner on Sunday. Yes, and then you went to see your house and you fell from a deck to the beach. Chris thought about that distance and shuddered, which made the pain worse. She heard footsteps entering the room. Chris opened her eyes. The room was poorly lit. There was a dim light source somewhere to her left, but she could see only shapes. Who is it? She asked. It's me, sweets, Danny's voice said. He took her hand. I've been very worried about you. It's nice to have you back. I'm Paul Villiers, the other man said. I'm a neurologist on staff at Cedars-Sinai. That's where you are. Well, you sound like a nice man, Chris said. Maybe if you opened the blinds, I could get a look at you. There was a long silence. Everyone seemed frozen. Chris felt fingers at her eyelids, and from a great distance came a pinpoint of light. She heard the doctor sigh again. What is it? She asked. The blinds are open, Chris, Villiers said. The room is filled with sunlight. Dr. Villiers dragged up a chair. I'm going to tell you all I know, he said. I owe you that much. I'm blind. Is that it? She held her breath and waited for the answer. Don't make it any worse than it is. The good news is that you can see some light and discern some shapes. What's the bad news? That's the bad news, too. That's all you can see. When you fell, you struck the back of your head on rock, damaging the occipital lobes of your brain. Think of it this way. You've bruised a part of your brain, and all the pain you felt has come from that. You're fortunate that the treatment policy of this hospital caused you to receive heavy doses of steroids when you were admitted to the emergency room. That's standard here, since it was learned that in spinal injuries, steroids can promote the regeneration of tissue if they are applied immediately. What's the prognosis? She dreaded his answer. There's a wide range. The worst case is that you could remain as you are. Chris gave an involuntary shudder. A death sentence could hardly have made her feel worse. What would she do? How could she work? But, he said hurriedly, the best case is that the injured area of your brain could regenerate completely and your sight could be completely restored. What's your best guess? She said, afraid to hope. Somewhere between the two extremes, he replied. I expect you'll finish up nearer the good extreme than the bad. How long will it take? It could take as long as 18 months. That's a maximum. You mean that what sight I have after 18 months is what I'll always have? That's probable. I think you'll see improvement long before that, though. Dr. Villiers, thank you for being straight with me. It's how I try and do it. Now, I have some rounds to make, and there are a couple of people here to see you. Danny spoke up. Ron Morrow and Jack Berman are here, Danny said. I'll get them. A few minutes later, after the pleasantries and encouragement had passed, everyone seemed at a loss for words. Ron, what have you told the studio? Chris asked. Well, that you'll be in the hospital for a few days and laid up for a while. Do they know I'm blind? You're not blind, Danny said. Oh, let's call it what it is. I can't see much. I can't read a script. I can't work. No, they don't know that, Ron said. Nobody does. But, Chris, I have to tell you that they've replaced you on the film. It was to be expected. They didn't know if you'd ever regain consciousness, let alone if you could work anytime soon. They have a big investment to protect. What have you released to the press? Just that you're recovering from injuries received in a fall and that a complete recovery is anticipated. You made Entertainment Tonight last night, and it was in the trades today. I've had a lot of calls, Ron said. Everybody wishes you well. I've had a bunch of calls too, Jack said. And look at all the flowers you got. Oh, sorry. Thanks, Jack. I know what you meant. Tell me about the flowers, she said. They're from all over, Danny replied. Some from the studio, some from Brent Williams and Jason Quinn, some from Brad, and there are a lot of roses from somebody, 6 dozen, no card. Chris began to laugh. What? Danny said, laughing with her. Oh, shit, it's not him, is it? It's him, Chris said. Later, when Danny had gone and she was alone, Chris began to cry. She had never been so frightened in her life. 3 days later, as soon as Chris and Danny pulled to a stop in her driveway, Chris was out of the car, striding up the front walk, determined not to feel blind in this place she knew so well. She ran up the stairs, put her key expertly into the front door lock, opened the door, and fell flat on her face in the entrance hall. Danny was right behind her. Oh, shit, he moaned. The maid left the vacuum cleaner right in front of the door. Chris untangled her feet from the machine and stood up. Suddenly, she felt dizzy and disoriented, and she reached out for Danny. She began to cry. I'm crying because I'm mad, she said. Listen to me, kiddo, and don't argue. I'm moving into the guest room. I can manage, Danny, she said. The hell you can, Danny replied in a tone that brooked no argument. Oh, all right, Chris sighed. I'm too tired to fight you. The guest room is yours. Go home and get your things. My things are already here and unpacked, Danny said. The first morning back in the house, Danny tried to bring her breakfast in bed, but she wouldn't have it. She insisted on making it herself, and under Danny's watchful gaze, she fumbled around the kitchen, burning herself on the toaster and spilling orange juice until she had breakfast for both of them on the table. I hear Melanie's car in the driveway, Danny said after they had eaten, and that means I'm out of here. I'll see you tonight. He pecked her on the cheek and ran. Chris spent a few minutes letting Melanie know that she was not going to be treated like a blind person. Then she got herself dressed, brushed her hair, and began blundering from room to room, knocking over things, writing them, and memorizing where they were. By the time Melanie had left for the day, there was a new map of her residence imprinted on Chris's brain, and she was moving about with new confidence. She was walking from the living room, across the entrance hall toward the dining room, when she stopped. There was something different in the way the entrance hall sounded when her heels struck the marble, less of an echo or something. Then she had the oddest feeling on one side of her body, the side nearest the door. It was as if someone were passing a hand near her skin. Suddenly she was certain there was another person in the house, only a few feet away from her, standing near the front door. Chris froze for a moment, then turned and went back into the living room, trying to stop trembling. There was a vase of dried flowers on a table to her right. She picked it up and started back toward the dining room. Then, when she knew she was in the middle of the entrance hall, she threw the vase of flowers at the front door as hard as she could. Then she ran. In a moment, she was in the bedroom, locking the door, then dialing 911, shaking, feeling helpless and afraid. By the time the Beverly Hills police arrived, Chris had recovered herself sufficiently to insist on making the 2 patrolmen coffee. She was very careful not to spill a drop. There's somebody coming from the station I think you should talk to, one of the officers said. His name is Larson. He's a detective. He specializes in cases like this. About the letters and the flowers. Chris heard the front door open, and a minute later Danny rushed into the room breathless. She explained what had happened, and the two policemen left. A few minutes later, the doorbell rang. Danny went to answer it and came back with another man. "Chris, this is Detective Larson," he said. "How do you do, Detective?" Chris asked. "Would you like some coffee? There's some made." "Thank you, yes," Larson said. Chris heard him drag a chair up to the kitchen table. He sounded nice, maybe in his mid-30s. She got the cup to the table without spilling it. Chris told Larson the story, and he was silent for a moment. "I don't quite understand," he said finally. "You felt there was someone in the house." "That's right." "Do you have psychic tendencies, Miss Callaway?" No. I just meant I didn't actually see him." "You threw a vase of flowers at someone you couldn't see." Yes, I suppose I did." "Miss Callaway, is your vision impaired in any way?" Chris sighed. "I had hoped you couldn't tell. Your two policemen seemed not to notice." "Most people wouldn't have," Larson said. "I have a younger sister who was blinded in an accident when she was 19. She fools people all the time. But don't worry, I'll respect your wishes." "Thank you," Chris replied. "Now, let's begin at the beginning," Larson said. When Chris had finished, Larson sipped at his coffee and didn't say anything. "Well," Danny said, "what do you think?" "Well, your case is not unusual," Larson said. Danny spoke up. "You mean this happens all the time?" "Not all the time," Larson replied, "but it happens. I am the threat management unit on our force. I deal all the time with something called the Stalker phenomenon, people who obsessively follow or contact other people. These guys can make life a living hell for their victims. Your admirer has been very carefully anonymous. In roughly half of our cases, the stalker tries to keep his identity secret." "What do you think that means?" Chris asked. "It's hard to say, but of course the first thing we want to do in an active case is to identify the stalker." "So what steps are you going to take, Detective?" Danny asked. "First of all, Miss Callaway, please call me Chris. The whole world does." "Thank you. I think it would be a good idea if you weren't left alone for a while, at least until we see how this situation develops." "You think it will develop?" Chris asked. I don't know. I think it's probable that your admirer will keep writing. I'd like to hear about it if there's any change in the tone of the letters, or if he starts sending you something besides flowers. Also, if he should telephone you, try not to aggravate him. Be nice, and don't try to find out who he is or anything about him. He could get paranoid if you start asking questions. He may volunteer information about himself or even his identity. If that happens, then I can have a little talk with him." Larson rose to go. Chris rose with him. "I don't think he'll telephone. I have a private number." "Well," Larson said, shaking both their hands, "you thought you had a private address, too." On Monday morning, after breakfast, Danny glanced at his watch. "Jesus, it's 9:20. I'm due at Burbank at 9:30. "Why don't you go ahead?" Chris said. "Melanie is never late. There must have been some unusually heavy traffic coming in from the valley." "I hate to leave you alone," Danny replied. "Go on. Melanie will be here any minute." Danny pecked her on the cheek and rushed from the house. A few minutes later, the phone rang. "Hello?"
"I'm afraid Melanie is going to be late today."
Chris struggled to hear. "What? What are you talking about?"
"You don't really need all these people around you. I'm perfectly capable of meeting your needs. And I mean all your needs."
"Listen to me very carefully," Chris said. "I don't want to hear from you again. I don't want to receive letters or flowers from you or telephone calls. If I do hear from you again for any reason, I'll go to the police." There was a soft chuckle from the other end of the line.
"The police? What on earth do I have to fear from the police? I'm a law-abiding citizen, they wouldn't dare touch me. Put the police out of your mind, Chris. They're helpless in dealing with somebody of my caliber.
Go away, Chris said stubbornly. Do you understand those words? Do you grasp their meaning? Go away!
You don't mean that. You love my little expressions of affection. You wouldn't know what to do without me. Very soon now, I will be your life.
The line went dead. Chris hung up the phone. Where the hell was Melanie? The phone rang again, and Chris snatched it up. Hello? Chris, it's Melanie. I'm awfully sorry to be late, but I've had an accident. Oh, well, what sort of accident? Are you all right? I'm okay. Some son of a bitch ran me off the road coming down Beverly Glen. I had to walk to a phone. Chris sat for a moment, frightened, trying to figure out what to do. Then she called the Beverly Hills Police Department and asked for John Larson. Larson was there in 15 minutes. I will be your life. Is that what he said? Larson was writing all this down. Yes. Melanie is your secretary? What was it he said about her? He said she would be late. Then Melanie called a minute later and said somebody had run her off the road up Beverly Glen somewhere. How long ago was that? Maybe 20 minutes. My chief doesn't allow me to get involved until there's at least the threat of a criminal act. What I'll do is park a patrol car outside your house for 24 hours. This man seems to keep very close tabs on you, so he's bound to see it, and that may be enough to scare him off. Not a chance, Chris said. When I said I would call the police, he was contemptuous. He said the police couldn't touch him. In fact, he said they wouldn't dare mess with someone of his caliber. I see, Larson said. In that case, what we need to do is get ahead of his thought process. How do you mean? Well, I think he'd expect something like the patrol car to start with. Maybe what we need to do is give him something he doesn't expect. Such as? Well, instead of scaring him off, let's try to catch him. Later in the afternoon, Melanie came into the study, where Chris was sitting disconsolately, listening to CNN. She introduced two men to Chris. These gentlemen are the fuzz, she said. Come to do something to your phone. I'm not a cop, one man said. I'm from the phone company, but the cops made me come in their van. The other man spoke up. I'm the cop. Detective Larson thought you might like a new line in the house, in addition to the old one, a number that your stalker doesn't have. The two men did the work in less than an hour, and the cop told Chris her new number. I'm going to give the number to Larson, but he has asked that, for the time being, you not give it to anyone else, not even your secretary or your housemate. All right, Chris said. She repeated the number aloud a few times to imprint it on her brain. If he calls, keep him talking as long as you can, and we might be able to track him down and grab him. I'll do that, she said. When the cop and the telephone man had left, and Melanie was back in her office working, Chris turned off the television and sat, thinking how stuck she was. She had never realized how alone blindness could make a person. Feeling sorry for herself, she dozed. The phone startled her wide awake. She turned toward the instrument, the two instruments now that she had a second line, and felt for the one on the left, her old number. Hello?
So, how's your day going?
Why would you care? She asked.
Oh, I care. I care more deeply than anyone has ever cared for you.
I'm really having a hard time understanding you. Why would you force all this attention on someone who hasn't the slightest interest in you?
You don't really feel that way. At least you won't for long. I'll grow on you.
The line went dead. Chris put down the phone and reached for the new line. She felt for the keypad and dialed Larson's direct line. It's Chris, she said when he answered. It was a payphone on Wilshire Boulevard, Larson said. A unit is on the way. They just might snag him. He put her on hold. Chris waited, realizing that talking to this faceless policeman was becoming the high point of each day. "I'm back," Larson said. "The car found an empty booth. They figure they missed him by less than half a minute." "Oh," she said, disappointed, but not surprised. "Do you mind if I drop by a little later this afternoon?" Larson asked. "I'll be here all day," she said. "See you later." She hung up and sighed. Who would have thought she would look forward so much to a visit from a policeman? The phone rang. She felt for the instrument on the left and picked it up. "Hello?" She was greeted with a dial tone. The phone rang again. It was the new line. John must be calling back. She picked it up. "Don't tell me you're breaking our date," she laughed.
"We don't have a date yet, but we will. You've been a bad girl."
He hung up. Chris continued to hold the receiver, stunned. She had had the new line for only a few hours, and Admirer already knew the number. When Larson arrived, he removed his shoes and padded into Chris's study. He went to the telephone on the desk and, while holding down the flasher button, removed the receiver from its cradle and unscrewed the mouthpiece. He looked inside, screwed the cap back on, then conducted a thorough inspection of the study, the living room, the kitchen, and Chris's bedroom before he returned to the rear terrace. "What have you been doing?" Chris asked. "It's been at least half an hour." "I'm not quite finished," he said. "Do you know where the central telephone box for your house is?" In the basement, I think. I'll be right back." Larson walked around the house and found the door, down a short flight of steps. There was a musty smell, and everything was covered in dust. The telephone box was on the opposite wall. He walked across the concrete floor and opened the box. There was a flashlight on a shelf next to the box, and he switched it on and inspected the wiring. The batteries were weak, but there was enough light to reveal a small wire running from a terminal through a drilled hole out of the box and up to a brick ledge. Larson felt along the ledge, following the wire until it ran down the wall and behind some empty cardboard boxes. It was connected to a small plastic box, and a telescopic antenna of about 3 feet in length was attached to that. He held the flashlight close to the plastic case, but could not see any trace of fingerprints. Admirer was a very neat fellow. Back on the rear terrace, he pulled a chair up next to Chris and sat down. "Now, tell me what the hell you've been doing," she said. "I'm afraid your admirer has bugged your house." "What?" "He's placed electronic bugs in all your telephones, the kind that pick up any conversation whether the phone is in use or not. He wired a small transmitter to your central telephone box." "You mean he's been listening to everything that goes on in my home?" "I'm afraid so. That's how he got the new telephone number. When the telephone company man told you what it was, he heard it too." "The rotten little son of a bitch. I hope you ripped out his handiwork." "No, I left it in place." "Why? I don't want him listening to my life." "If I take it out, he'll find another way. Admirer is a very clever fellow. At least this way we can control what he hears, and we'll be able to use his system against him." "I see," Chris said. "At least I think I see." Danny stuck his head out the back door. "Jesus," he said, "you scared me to death. I couldn't find Chris anywhere." "Come on out, Danny, and join us," Larson said. Danny dragged up a chair and sat down. "So," he said, "what's happening?" Larson told him. "Okay," Larson said finally. "Here's what we do. We walk back into the house and chat for a few minutes, and I'll take my leave. Then, Danny, you and Chris sit down in the study and tell Chris that you've got to go out tonight." "I can't leave her alone," Danny said. "Don't worry," Larson said. "She won't be alone. You leave at, say, 7. It'll be dark then, and I'll enter the house through the back door. Be sure to leave it open." "Then what?" Chris asked. "The last time you were alone in the house, Admirer paid you a visit, remember?" "I remember." "Well, he might not be able to pass up another opportunity, especially if he wants to punish you. I see, Chris said unenthusiastically. That night, Chris sat in her study and listened to Danny's car pulling out of the driveway. She had always enjoyed solitude, had treasured an evening with nothing to do but read a novel, but not tonight. John had told her not to turn on any lights. It wouldn't be the natural thing for a blind person, he had said. It made her uncomfortable knowing that she sat in the dark, even though the light would have made little difference to her. At 6:30, Larson hurried from the station and drove up Sunset to Stone Canyon. He parked his car in the parking lot of the Bel Air Hotel, crossed the street, and continued on foot. He couldn't just drive up to Chris's house, but he had found he could get there by way of a disused bridle path. He entered a wooded area, making his way slowly through the undergrowth, trying not to use his pocket flashlight. The going soon became easier. He turned down his handheld police radio so that transmissions would not give away his presence, and walked faster. He was less than 100 yards from the back garden of the house when, perhaps 30 yards ahead, a man came from out of the woods and onto the bridle path. Larson began to run. In the house, Chris froze, didn't let an eyelid flutter. Something had wakened her, not a noise, but a feeling. She sat upright in the wing chair and tried not to scream. After a moment's silence, she heard someone sit down in the other wing chair opposite her. She still did not move. Larson hit the astonished man low. Then they were on the ground and struggling. The man had recovered from his surprise now and was fighting for all he was worth. It was dark in the woods, but Larson managed to get his left forearm across his opponent's throat and his gun into his right hand. He pressed it to the man's temple. "Freeze! Police!" Larson shouted, and the man suddenly stopped struggling. The whisper began, low and sibilant.
Chrissy, 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 Chrissy.
It grew louder, then stopped. Chris raised her head and opened her eyes. "Who are you, and what do you want?" was all she could think of to say.
"I want everyone to know you're mine."
She started to rise, but she was pushed back into the chair by a heavy weight, and her left wrist was seized in an incredibly strong grip. He was sitting on her, pressing her back into the upholstery, and there was a buzzing noise in the room. Now there was a stinging sensation on the back of her left hand. She tried to scream, but his back was pushed into her face, and when she turned her head, the upholstery muffled the sound. They were locked together for several minutes, it seemed to her. Then suddenly, she was released. Larson handcuffed the man, then dragged him to his feet, and holding onto the cuffs, marched him toward Chris's house. With his free hand, he found the little radio. "This is Larson. I need a squad car at the Stone Canyon house."
"Now you are mine, and everyone will know it. Start getting rid of all these people in your life. The queer, the secretary, the cop. You won't need them anymore."
Chris bolted. Secure in her knowledge of her house, she sprang from the chair and sprinted toward the front door. She was down the steps and running to the road before she tripped and fell headlong down the hill. Her screams echoed up the canyon. Larson shoved his suspect through the back door of the house and found the study. "Chris!" he called. Then he heard the siren as the squad car approached. "Come on, buddy," he said, shoving the man before him toward the front door. When they were on the front steps, he looked down the lawn and saw Chris on her feet, swinging wildly at the cop and his woman partner who were trying to calm her. The man was a neighbor, simply taking a walk through the wooded area. He accepted Larson's apology and left. Larson sat down across from Chris. "Are you all right?" he asked. Chris took a deep breath. "I think so, but he sure scared the hell out of me." Tell me exactly what happened, Larson said. Calming herself, Chris related the events of a few minutes before. He sat on you? Larson asked. Yes, he seemed to want my left hand. It stung for a while. In fact, it still stings. She felt Larson take her hand. He made a small noise of disgust. What's the matter? Chris asked, alarmed. What did he do to my hand? Larson sighed. He rubbed the back of her hand. It looks as though he made a sort of crude tattoo on it. Chris snatched back her hand and held it to her breast. What? What kind of a tattoo? It's crude, but it appears to be a rose. He's tattooed a rose on my hand. Will it come off? Tell me, did you hear anything while he was doing this? Yes, there was a kind of a buzzing noise. I think you'll probably have to see a dermatologist to have it removed, Larson said. Admirer apparently used an electric tattoo needle. This is the end of side 1. Chris began to cry, moved by anger and shame. Branded. She had been branded by this bastard, as if she were an animal. When the police had cleared out, Danny made them a cup of tea and they sat in the study together. Suddenly, Chris began to cry again. She wept as she had not done since she was a child, and she couldn't seem to stop. Danny took her in his arms and stroked her hair. You go right ahead, baby, he said. Get it all out. Finally, when she was able to get control of herself, she looked up at her friend. Danny, she said, I want you to do something for me. Sure, sweets, anything, Danny said. I want you to buy me a gun. When the phone rang, Chris forced herself to answer it. Admirer had been calling daily, and she was sick of him, but she wouldn't hide from him. It was Sunday. Hello? It's John. How are you? She breathed a sigh of relief. Annoyed, she said. He's been calling every day, and I've talked to him the way you suggested. Why, have you learned any more about him? No, and it's maddening. He knows everything about me. So what are you doing on a Sunday? I thought you might like to get out of the house this afternoon. I'd love to, and I'm sure Danny would like an afternoon off. He's been stuck here with me all this time. Can I pick you up in about an hour? All right, but I get to choose what we do. Okay by me. Promise? No arguments? Okay, I promise. See you in an hour. She hung up. Less than an hour later, Larson helped Chris into his car. What is it? She asked, feeling the dash. It's an old MG TF 1500, he said, walking around the little car. Built in 1954, the last of the classic MGs. I spent 2 years restoring it. Now, I said I'd take you anywhere you wanted to go. What'll it be? Let's take Sunset down to Pacific Coast Highway, she said. You can enjoy all the curves. My thought exactly, Larson said. He turned right on Sunset and accelerated. I love it, she cried. I love a girl who loves it, Larson replied. She was easy and natural for an actress, he thought. Why did you become a cop? Chris asked. He seemed too polished, too smart to be a cop. She thought of cops as cruder somehow. I had a criminal law instructor who was a cop. I liked him a lot, and he made the work seem interesting. Took me on patrols, let me look over his shoulder. Has the work been interesting? She asked. Oh, yes. Cops get hooked on their work. Not many I've known have dropped out. They reached the coast, and soon Larson turned right and started uphill. We're heading up into the mountains, he said. We'll be on Mulholland in a few minutes. Good. But you can't guess what I want to do when we get there. You want a neck, he said. Nice try. Well, that's what all the other girls I took up here wanted to do. I'm not surprised, she laughed. Danny says you're good-looking, and he's a pretty good judge of beefcake. Larson hooted with laughter. Well, I'm glad somebody finds me attractive these days. Mulholland Drive was nothing but a dirt track at this end. Larson drove slowly, taking care of his little car. Any particular place you want to go? He asked. When you start to be afraid for your car and nobody else is around, you can pull over. We're there, he said, pulling off the road onto the grassy shoulder. Now what? Chris reached into her handbag and pulled out a small automatic pistol. I want you to teach me to use this, she said. I thought you told me you weren't going to buy a gun, he said. Nope, you told me. I'm afraid I ignored your advice. As soon as you left, I asked Danny to buy one for me. Larson picked up the little pistol and looked at it. You realize that by having this in your bag, you were carrying a concealed weapon. Sue me, he laughed. Larson spent almost an hour teaching her how to load and fire the little Italian-made .22 pistol. For God's sake, don't ever tell anybody who taught you to use this, he said when they were finished. The department frowns on that sort of thing. I won't. I'm grateful for your help. Larson took her arm and steered her back toward the little MG. As he opened the door, he looked up, and in the distance he saw a man on a motorcycle stopped in the road a half-mile behind them. As he closed the door, he reached into the glove compartment and retrieved a pair of small 8-power binoculars and raised them to his eyes. The motorcycle was red, and the rider was dressed in black leather and a black helmet. His face was obscured by a pair of binoculars. He was looking at Larson and Chris. By the time they got back to the house, it was getting dark, and Danny was waiting for them. Larson said his goodnight, and as he started to leave, Danny waved at him and mouthed the word, wait. Larson left the house, but waited outside. A moment later, the front porch light went on, and Danny came outside. Thanks for waiting, he said. I wanted to show you something, and I didn't want Chris to know about it. What is it? Larson asked. Danny pulled an envelope from his pocket. This was in the mailbox when I got home. Larson opened the envelope and carefully removed a Polaroid photograph. He held it up to the porch light and looked closely at the image. Jesus Christ, he said. Larson sat at his desk and looked at the photograph again. He had looked at it over and over during the past 15 hours, but it still made him feel ill. Feeling at a loss for something to do, he switched on his computer and gazed blankly at the screen while the program was loaded into memory. The program's title appeared on the screen. Stalker Profile. Prepared for the Threat Management Unit of the Los Angeles Police Department by C.E. Ripley, M.D. The profile was useless because he had no personal information about Admirer. Suddenly he focused on the screen. He reached into a bottom desk drawer, found a phone book, looked up the number, and dialed. I'm Chuck Ripley, the doctor said an hour later when Larson appeared at his office. He was tall, stout, and balding. John Larson, Dr. Ripley, Larson said, shaking hands. Thank you for seeing me. What can I do for you? I'm investigating a stalker, and it occurs to me that the profile you created represents only a fraction of what you must know about the stalker phenomenon. I think it's fair to say that, Ripley agreed. You must have studied a large number of cases over the years. About 3,000 at last count. What I'd like to do is to tell you about this particular stalker. We call him Admirer, and I'd like to see what conclusions, if any, you can draw about him. Larson placed the Polaroid photograph on the desk between them. The two men looked at it together. It was a picture of another photograph from an open book lying on a corner of a rug. A wooden floor was revealed in a corner of the picture. Ripley mused. You wouldn't ordinarily see a shot of an open chest in a consumer magazine or book. The sight of stainless steel retractors pushing apart the rib cage might cause a lot of suburban housewives to faint. Notice the printed caption, Larson said. It appears to have been done on an electronic labeling machine. One of my favorite pastimes, Ripley read aloud. And have you noticed that the torso is that of a woman? I noticed, Larson said. Does Miss Callaway know about this? Ripley asked. No, I didn't think it would be helpful. Quite right. I think the photograph means that Admirer has moved the game to a new level. There seems little doubt in light of this message that he could very well become violent. In fact, I would regard the photograph as a promise. I was afraid you'd say something like that, Larson said. You may have something else to be afraid of, Dr. Ripley said. What do you mean? Tell me, has Admirer had an opportunity to observe you and Miss Callaway together in circumstances that he might construe as romantic? Larson thought about their ride up to Mulholland Drive in his car. Yes, he has. Then I should think you have at least as much to fear from him as does the young lady. Back in his car, Larson took the Polaroid photograph from his pocket and stared at it again, willing it to yield more information. Suddenly, it did. He held it as close to his eyes as he could and still focus, wishing he had a magnifying glass. He didn't know much about these things, but he had a strong urge to talk to somebody who did. He drove to a shop called Westward Ho. There was a display of Indian pots in the window, and some of them looked very old. Inside, he waited while the only person in attendance, a small man in his early 50s, carried on a lengthy conversation with a young couple. Finally, the couple left the store, and the man turned his attention to Larson. I'm sorry to keep you waiting, he said. May I help you? Thank you, yes, Larson said, producing the photograph. I know there's not much of it visible, but I wonder if you could tell me anything about this. The man looked at the photograph. Ooh, yuck, he said. I'm sorry about the nature of the photograph, Larson said. It's the rug under it that interests me. Oh, yes, the man said, looking at the photograph closely. I'm with the Beverly Hills Police Department. This photograph is evidence in a case, and I hope the rug might tell me something about the person who took the picture. My name is Larson. I'm Jason Willoughby, the man replied. Well, the rug is unquestionably Navajo, a chief's blanket. I would place it in the mid-1920s. You can tell that much about it from just the corner visible in the picture? Not everyone could, Willoughby said. I can. That's remarkable, Larson said admiringly. Can you show me what about the rug gives you that information? Of course. The design is Navajo for a start, and although the Zapotec Indians in Mexico regularly copy Navajo designs, they use different wools and dyes. Also, the stitching on the edge here. He stopped talking and stared at the photograph. What sort of value would you place on a Navajo rug like this? Larson asked. I could get $25,000 from the right buyer, Willoughby replied. It's not the rarest sort of Navajo, but it's a very good one. I found it in an estate sale. Larson blinked. Do I understand you to say that you sold this same rug? That's right. 2 years ago, give or take. This was too good to be true. Are you certain? Let's see, Willoughby said. He walked to a card file cabinet in a corner of the shop, opened a drawer, and began flipping through cards. Aha, he said, and extracted an index card from the file, handing it to Larson. There was a photograph of the rug stapled to the card. Larson compared it with his Polaroid shot. They were identical. He grinned. That's extraordinary, he said. You keep very good records. Well, it pays. And do you have a record of who you sold it to? On the back of the index card. Larson flipped over the card. Bennett Millman, he read aloud. Ah, yes, Millman. The rug was the second piece he bought from me. The address was on Copa de Oro in Bel Air, not half a mile from Chris Callaway's house. "Thank you very much, Mr. Willoughby. You've been very helpful." "Not at all," Willoughby replied. "Do you know the most extraordinary thing about that rug?" "What?" "It's on the floor. A knowledgeable collector would hang a textile of that quality, not walk on it. Mr. Millman is awfully cavalier with his possessions." Larson sprinted for his car. As he drove toward Bel Air, it occurred to him that he might not want to face Millman alone, especially since the man knew what he looked like. He picked up the microphone and radioed for a squad car to meet him at the Copa de Oro address. There was a wrought iron gate at the entrance to the property, but it was open. Larson waited a couple of minutes for the squad car to show up. The place was beautifully landscaped and manicured, as was most of the property in such an expensive neighborhood. Larson walked to the door and rang the bell. He expected a servant to answer, but no one came. Larson was about to walk around to the rear of the house when a white Cadillac pulled into the driveway and 3 people got out. An attractive young woman and a middle-aged couple. The young woman approached him. "Can I help you?" she asked. "I'm looking for Mr. Millman," Larson said. She looked at him oddly. "May I ask what for?" "I'm Detective Larson, Beverly Hills PD. I need to speak to Mr. Millman." "I'm afraid that's impossible," the woman said. "Mr. Millman died nearly 3 months ago." "What?" "I'm a real estate agent. I'm here to show the house." "I see," Larson said. "Tell me, are the furnishings still in the house?" "No, Mrs. Millman held an auction a couple of weeks ago and sold everything, right to the walls." "Can you tell me who the auctioneer was?" Auctioneers kept careful records of sales. He could trace the rug. Mrs. Millman was. She didn't want to pay an auctioneer, so she put an ad in the Times and sold it all herself, cash only. She wouldn't even take a check." "Were you at the auction by any chance?" He was grasping at straws again. "I'm afraid not." She leaned closer. "Listen, I don't want to scare my clients off having the cops here. If there's nothing else, would you and your buddies mind leaving?" "Sure," Larson said wearily. "There's nothing else for us here. Tell me, where can I get in touch with Mrs. Millman?" "She's living in Palm Springs." The woman produced her business card. "If you'll call my office, they'll give you her address." "Thanks. I'll do that." Back in the car, Larson laid his head against the headrest and sighed. His hot lead was getting colder by the minute. In the car with Danny, Chris rubbed the back of her hand. "Don't do that," Danny admonished. "You'll just get it infected." "How does it look?" she asked. "Pretty red." "Well, the dermatologist said it would heal just like sunburn." "It's not going to be a problem, sweets. Don't worry about it." "Danny, is anybody following us?" "Not that I can see." "Come on now, don't get paranoid on me." "I want to see Graham Hong." "What for?" "Will you call him and ask him to come to the house?" "Sure." "And Danny?" "Yes." "Maybe you should get a gun for yourself, too." He looked at his watch. 9 o'clock, straight up. He dialed Chris Callaway's number. "Hello?" Her voice was tense, challenging. "Hi, it's John. Is everything all right?" "Oh, hi." The voice relaxed. She sounded glad to hear from him. "Yes, everything's all right." "Listen, I've got to drive down to Palm Springs this morning on business. I know it's short notice, but I just found out. Would you like a drive in the sun? Have some lunch, then come back?" "Boy, would I. I'm starting to get cabin fever." "Is this something to do with Admirer?" Larson hesitated. He didn't want to tell her about the Polaroid photograph. "No," he said, "another case." An hour later, they were on the freeway. He checked the ramp behind him in the rearview mirror. Only one car, a red Japanese number. When he checked the mirror again, he saw a van a couple of cars back. Then it seemed to go away. He checked another 2 or 3 times, then forgot about it. Larson found the Millman house in Palm Springs and parked the MG in the shade of a palm tree. "I'm not sure I could explain the presence of a beautiful woman at this interview," he said to Chris. "Do you mind waiting here?" "It's fine," Chris replied. "I'm enjoying the weather." He left the radio on for her and approached the house. A low hedge separated a lushly planted front yard from the sidewalk. 4 sprinklers worked at keeping the grass an emerald green. He rang the bell. A small Hispanic woman answered the door. "Yes?" Larson didn't waste time with pleasantries. He showed her the badge. "I'm the police. We talked this morning. I want to see Mrs. Millman now." The woman quickly let him in. She led the way through the house and out into a larger landscaped garden surrounding a kidney-shaped swimming pool. "Please wait here," she said, and shuffled toward a woman in a lounge chair. The two exchanged a few words, and the maid waved Larson over, then fled back into the house. Larson approached the poolside, and he discovered that whatever mental image he had formed of Mrs. Millman was incorrect. The widow, who he guessed was an extraordinarily well-preserved 40, was clad in the smallest bikini he had ever seen. "Good day," Larson said, showing his badge again. "I'm Detective John Larson of the Beverly Hills Police Department." "How do you do, Detective?" she said, rising. "What can I do for you?" The woman, in spite of her state of dress, or undress, was all business. He produced Jason Willoughby's photograph of the rug. "Do you recognize this?" he asked. "Yes, it belonged to my husband," she said. "Did you recently sell it at an auction?" "I did." "Do you, by any chance, recall to whom you sold it?" He tried not to hold his breath. "Of course," she said. "He paid $3,500 for it." A bargain, Larson thought. "Do you recall the buyer's name?" "Of course, it was James." "His last name?" "Oh, I don't know. I never called him anything but James." "You knew him before the auction?" "Why, yes, he lived in our guest house, acted as sort of a house sitter when we were down here or in New York." "He lived on your property, and you never knew his last name?" "Oh, Bennett knew it, I suppose. After all, he dealt with the fellow. I never saw him, except from a distance. He went to work early in the morning and was rarely home before dark." "How did you know when he left and returned?" "Well, either the van or the motorcycle would be gone, and then it would be back under the guest house carport." "He drove a van and a motorcycle?" "That's right." "Do you know what kind of van or motorcycle?" "The van was sort of a grayish-green, and the motorcycle was red." "I meant, did you ever notice the manufacturers' names?" "No." "Where did James work?" "He apparently had some sort of business, but I never knew what. He was very handy. He'd sometimes repair things around the house." "Can you describe James in as much detail as possible, please?" Chris sat in the MG, her head against the back of the seat, half dozing. She felt happy to be away from the house, out of Los Angeles, and with John Larson. A car pulled up next to the MG and stopped. Chris turned her head toward it. A gray shape, bigger than a car, noisier too. It sat there, idling. She heard the door open, and suddenly she was alert. An all-too-familiar smell had reached her. The scent of roses. Chris acted without thinking. She tore open the door of the little sports car and scrambled out, tripping on the curb and falling onto the grass. She rolled to her feet, feeling the edge of the sidewalk. She began running. She had no idea where she was going, but there were rapid footsteps behind her. James was, I don't know, medium, Mrs. Millman was saying. Medium height, medium weight, medium hair. Eyes? I never looked into them. Any distinguishing marks or scars? Bennett said he had a tattoo. It worried him at first because he associated tattoos with convicts, but James won him over quickly. Do you know where on his body the tattoo was? I'm afraid not. Did he ever give your husband a check for the rent? I don't think so. Bennett liked to deal in cash. Can you describe his voice? Sort of a medium voice, I guess. Not deep. Not high-pitched, pleasant enough. Did he have any sort of accent? Not that I recall, sounded pure Californian. When did James move out of the guest house? Well, now that you mention it, I'm not sure that he has. His rent was paid until the end of this month. Larson's heart leapt. Is James in some sort of trouble? Not exactly. I'd just like to speak to him. I'd hate to think that some sort of criminal had been living in my guest house. As far as I know, he's never been arrested, Larson said, putting the best possible face on his reply. Thank you. I'd better be going. Can you find your way? She asked, stretching out her lithe body on the lounge again. Of course. Thanks for your help. She gave a little wave, then closed her eyes. When he returned to the car, Chris was not in it. Alarmed, he looked up and down the street. She was nowhere to be seen. The radio was still playing. Larson jumped into the MG and drove off down the street, forcing himself to drive slowly, to look in every driveway and front lawn. He turned right and kept looking. Suddenly, there she was, sitting at a wrought iron table on a side patio chatting with an elderly woman. He stopped and jumped out of the car. "Hello there," he called out as he approached. His heart was banging around inside his chest. "Are you all right?" he asked as he took her hand. She squeezed his hand. "I'm fine. John, this is Mrs. Burgess. She was kind enough to come to my rescue." "Rescue?" "I was waiting for you when some sort of large vehicle pulled up beside the car and someone got out. I smelled roses. I got out of the car and ran right into Mrs. Burgess, in fact, nearly knocked her down." Mrs. Burgess spoke up. "The man appeared to be hurrying after her. When he saw me, he ran back to his car, or rather it was a van." "Did you see his face, Mrs. Burgess?" Larson asked. "Not really. He turned around quite quickly." "Can you describe the man?" "Oh, I don't know. He was not too tall. Nicely dressed, I suppose. He wore a baseball cap." "Did you think to get the license number of the van?" "Yes, but too late. My eyesight isn't what it once was. It was a California plate, though. I'm sure of that. The very idea of someone frightening a blind girl like that," the woman said indignantly. "I wish I'd had time to go get my pistol." Larson laughed, in spite of himself, and so did Chris. "Thank you again for rescuing me," Chris said. "Any time," Mrs. Burgess replied. "Next time I'll blow him away." When they were back in the car, Larson heaved a sigh of relief. "I should never have left you alone," he said. "Nonsense. Who would have thought he could find us in Palm Springs?" She laughed. "I wish I'd had my pistol, too." Larson was looking forward to calling on Admirer that evening. Larson pulled into Chris's driveway, and Danny met them at the door. "Another half hour, and you'd have been grounded, young lady," he said, wagging a finger at her. "Oh, Danny, John has found out something about Admirer. He lives near here, and his first name is James." "Good news," Danny said. "Are you going to bust him?" "You bet," John said, "if I can get my hands on him. I'm going over there now and have a look around, and then I'll wait for him to come home from work." "You be careful," Chris said, reaching out for him and finding his hand. "And call me when it's over." She reached up, found his face, and pulled him down to her for a kiss. It was the first real affection that had passed between them, and it surprised him. The line between cop and victim had been crossed. "See you later," he said. Larson went to the back door, looked carefully around, then let himself out and headed for the old bridle path. He briefly considered asking for backup, but he now had a strong desire to meet Admirer face to face, just the two of them. He loped down the path and emerged into a street, then followed it toward Sunset for a few blocks. When he met Copa de Oro, he turned left and jogged slowly up the hill toward the Millman house. He worked his way around to the back of the Millman property, where he ran up against a rusted chain-link fence. He took a running start, planted a foot as far up the fence as he could, grabbed the top railing, and flung himself over, landing heavily, then rolling. He found himself behind the swimming pool, and he worked his way to the left through the dense undergrowth, avoiding a walk across the exposed lawn. He came to the end of the undergrowth and sprinted across the lawn to the rear wall of the guest house. He put an ear to the wall to see if he could hear anyone inside. Nothing. But the wall had to be at least 6 inches thick. He moved to the side of the house, away from the driveway, and looked through a window. The living room. A small lamp was on next to the sofa, and beyond that Larson could see several cardboard boxes, apparently full and sealed with silver duct tape. It looked as though Admirer had packed for his move and planned to come back for his belongings. Larson peeked around the house at the open carport. He could see the front fender of a red motorcycle around the far corner of the house. The van was nowhere to be seen. He went to the kitchen door and carefully tried the knob. Locked. 2 small pieces of metal, milled from a hacksaw blade by a friend, came into his hand and went into the lock on the kitchen door. Half a minute later, the door was unlocked. He eased the door shut behind him and moved to the living room. Across the room, near the little lamp, was a stack of magazines, and on top was a Popular Mechanics. But what fixed his gaze was the white address label stuck to the magazine cover. It contained all the information he wanted. Larson stepped into the living room, and as he did, a shadow moved on the wall to his left. He started to turn toward it, and as he did, he was struck hard on the back of the neck. Emitting a cry of pain, he fell to one knee, but managed to grab the arm of the chair, steadying himself. He began to rise, and as he came up, something came down to meet him. This time, he pitched forward onto his face and blacked out. When he came to, the house was empty, cleaned out. Groggily, Larson called his office. 2 hours later, the detectives were still combing the guest house. "Looks like he wiped everything down," one of them said. "Not everything," replied the other, pointing at the bottom of the telephone. "I've got a good print right here. Male. Left hand, second finger, I'd say. He held the phone in his left hand and made a call with his right." "Good," Larson said. "Let's get back to the office and run it. I want to know who this bastard is." Later, at home, Larson called Chris and told her what had happened. "What about the fingerprint?" she asked. "Did you identify him?" "No. There was no match in anybody's fingerprint files, ours or the FBI's. That means he's never been arrested, never been in the armed services." "Oh," she said. "But when we pick him up, the fingerprint can put him in that guest house, so we can add a battery charge to the list." "That's good. How are you feeling?" "Tired. I saw a doctor and he gave me a prescription. I'm to stay in bed for 24 hours. You do that. Want me to come and make chicken soup?" "That's a nice offer. I'll take you up on it when I'm in a condition to appreciate it more." On Saturday morning, Larson woke early and made himself some breakfast. The phone rang. "It's Chris. How do you feel about the beach?" "Pretty good. You have a particular beach in mind?" "Malibu." "Sounds good. Pick me up at 10 and bring a swimsuit. I'm buying lunch." "You got a deal." They drove out to Malibu with the wind in their faces. She gave him an address. "Whose place is this?" he asked. "It's the house I'm building," she replied. "I haven't been out there since the accident, and I want to see how the place is coming. I want to see how I feel about the place." When they arrived, Larson described the nearly completed house as they walked through it. "I'd say you're only a few weeks from completion," he said. Chris stood on the finished deck while Larson unloaded the car. They donned their swimsuits and went down the steps to the beach. "How do you feel about being out here again?" Larson asked. "I feel great. Just angry that I can't see it yet. That day will come." I'm already seeing light better, and people are definite shapes instead of just blobs. You, for instance, are a very handsome shape. You're not so bad yourself, he said. He spread a blanket out, and they settled onto it. He opened the cooler and put the food on the blanket, then opened a bottle of wine. Tell me about where you live, Chris said. I live in the house my folks built before I was born, in Santa Monica, he said. Your parents are dead? 8 years ago, within a week of each other, he said. What about yours? Both still living, back in Delano, Georgia. I'm glad you still have your folks, he said. I miss mine. They were good people. Is Larson Swedish? Norwegian. My grandfather came to L.A. in 1911, working as a carpenter. He died when I was 12. I would like to have known you when you were 12, she said. No, you wouldn't have. I was hopeless with girls. She reached out for his face. You're doing okay now, she said, kissing him. This was the second time she'd done that, Larson thought. And I'd better give the girl some help. He kissed her, and they lay back on the blanket. Larson was getting excited now, and so was the young woman in his arms. She wrapped a leg around his and pulled his thigh between her legs. There was a loud noise, and Larson looked up to see a substantial piece of sheetrock bouncing off the boulder next to them. Stay right here, he said. I'll be back. By the time he made his way to the house, there was no one there. Chris's clothes had been scattered around the master suite. Her underwear was gone. It was him, wasn't it? She asked when he returned. Could be. Let's get out of here. On the drive back to Bel Air, Larson asked Chris about her builder, Mike Moskowitz. Are you happy with him so far? He asked. Very. He's been very good about my not being out here to look at things. I'd like to talk to him. Do you mind? Mike doesn't know anything about this admirer thing, and I'd prefer to keep it that way. The more people that know about it, the more likely it is to end up in the tabloids. Sure, I understand. He didn't mention it again. Chris sat on a cushion sipping a strange oriental tea and listening to Graham Hong. He spent an hour showing her the most effective ways to disable a man. For another hour, Hong made her practice hitting him, and then he gave her a sand-filled dummy of a man's upper torso. Practice hitting this as hard as you can. It's important that you know how hard you can hit. This will give you confidence. Chris hit the dummy. It hurt. Remember, Hong summarized, lure him in close. Grab him or let him grab you. Then go for the eyes, nose, or throat. And always hit hard. Larson sat at his desk and waited for paper. Finally, the California Department of Motor Vehicles faxed him a computer printout of every Ford van registered in Los Angeles during the past 2 years. A quick glance told him there were more than 300. A little more than halfway down the list, he stopped. A van had been registered in August to the Moskowitz Construction Company, Inc. He made an effort to keep his pulse down as he continued through the list. When he had finished, he also had 4 individuals whose first or last name was James. He called the Moskowitz Construction Company and found out where Mike Moskowitz was working that day. It was in Santa Monica, and Larson cruised past the site slowly. The gray Ford van was parked outside, and, checking the license plate against the printout, he saw that the right plate was attached. As he entered the open front door, Larson saw a man of medium height and weight holding a briefcase as he stood at the bottom of the stairs speaking to a worker on the landing. Mike Moskowitz, Larson said, tensing. The man smiled. That's me, he said. No apparent recognition. I wonder if I could have a few minutes of your time, Larson said. Moskowitz didn't budge from his spot. That depends on what it's about, he said. Larson showed him the badge. Moskowitz waved the worker away. Step into my office, he said. He took a seat on a step. Larson sat down beside him. This is in confidence, okay? Okay. One of your clients, Chris Callaway, is being annoyed by somebody. How annoyed? There's reason to be concerned about her safety. Why are you talking to me? How many subcontractors are you using on Chris's house? The usual. Framer, plumber, electrician, alarm guy, roofer, drywall guy, whatever it takes. Can you give me a list of them, please? Sure, I guess so. Moskowitz took a battered address book from his briefcase and read out a dozen names and addresses while Larson took notes. Do any of them drive one of those? Larson asked, pointing through the open door at the van. Probably, Moskowitz replied. It's a pretty popular vehicle in the trade. Larson nodded. He opened his notebook to his list of vans. Any of these guys work for you? Michael James O'Hara, James B. Corbett, James M. Rivera, Marvin B. James. None of them rings a bell, Moskowitz said. Anybody work for you named James, either first or last name? Nope, Moskowitz replied. This is beginning to sound like a dry hole, Larson said. Sorry, wish I could help. You can. If anybody shows up at the Callaway house who fits the medium description and drives either a gray Ford van, like yours, or a red motorcycle, I'd really appreciate a call. He gave the builder a card. Okay, Moskowitz said. Larson shook hands with the builder and left. Lenny Moskowitz came down the stairs and stood next to his father. Was that about work? He asked. Moskowitz shook his head. Nah, that was a cop. The boy didn't speak for a moment. What did he want? He asked finally. Checking up on who works for me. Cops are always checking up. Did you tell him what he wanted to know? Nope. Moskowitz tore Larson's card in half and dropped it over the banister into a cardboard box full of rubbish. Pop, what is it with you and cops? Kiddo, Moskowitz said, punching his son playfully in the gut. If you'd grown up in the 60s, you wouldn't have to ask. Danny DeVere left the CBS television studios in Burbank at 3:30, exhausted. He had been doing hair since 6 a.m., and now all he wanted was to get to Chris's and stretch out on a sofa. When he stopped at the gate to wait for traffic, his brakes felt a little spongy, and he made a mental note to add this symptom to the list of items to check when he next had the car serviced. He headed towards Beverly Hills. As he crested the mountain edge that separated the San Fernando Valley from Beverly Hills, another sports car overtook him and cut in front of him too quickly, forcing him to brake hard. The brakes held for a moment, then let go completely. Danny was an experienced, even expert driver, and although he was alarmed, he did not panic. He shifted the automatic transmission down a notch, then into the lowest gear, which slowed his acceleration and looked for a driveway, a hedge, something that would stop the little car without killing him. Then there was a metallic snap, and the car gained speed again. He whipped the gear lever back and forth, trying to find park or reverse or any gear that would slow him down, but the transmission was now useless, and Danny knew the only thing that would stop the car was a solid object. Suddenly, Danny knew what he was going to do. There was traffic coming up the mountain now, but no car in front of him for another mile. At the end of that mile, he remembered, was a driveway that left Beverly Glen at a slight angle, and at the bottom of the driveway was something that might possibly save his life. Danny rounded a curve to his right, doing 80 or so, and left it in a four-wheel drift that took him to the opposite side of the road before he could correct. Where the hell was that driveway, he thought. He knew the people who lived there, and it was tough enough not to miss it at normal speeds. At his present velocity, he had a millisecond to make the entrance, and he felt relief when he saw the striped mailbox that marked it. He braced himself for the swerve, and to his surprise, made it. He was off Beverly Glen now and hurtling down 200 yards of gravel driveway that was about to turn sharply to the right, a turn he had no intention of trying to make. Out of a crazed curiosity, Danny looked at the speedometer, 85 miles an hour. He pointed the car straight ahead, and at the bend in the driveway, he and the convertible left the ground. The driveway's edge fell away to an embankment at the bottom of which lay a swimming pool. The car flew straight over the pool. Amazingly, the car maintained its directional stability, and when it struck the ground, it did so on all four wheels. Danny saw a glorious sight rushing at him. The car struck the tennis court fence and carried it down the court, making a horrible noise. Next, it hit the net. The steel wire supporting it snapped like a thread, and car, fence, and steel poles met the fence at the opposite end of the court. The thoroughly mangled car was netted like a trout. Danny didn't see anything after the first fence because the airbag was in his face. When the thing collapsed, he struggled to take a breath and then fainted. Larson sighed. He had plenty on admirer, but without the fingerprints, he couldn't make Parker as admirer. And he couldn't just drag Parker in and fingerprint him either, or strip him and search for a tattoo, not without probable cause. And owning one of 300 Ford vans in Greater L.A. didn't constitute probable cause. He checked to see if a motorcycle was registered either to Keyhole or to Mel Parker, and the answer was negative. He tried to think of something. Well, he might as well go and get a look at Parker. But he'd better not let Parker get a look at him because Parker knew him and he'd be on his guard. The phone rang. He picked it up. Larson? John, it's Chris. Hi, how are you? Terrible. I'm in the emergency room at Cedars-Sinai. Danny has had a horrible car crash and he's demanding to see you. Can you get down here right away? I'm on my way. Larson ran for his car. Danny DeVere was lying on a treatment table, and a doctor was putting what seemed to be the final stitch of a couple of dozen in a long wound in his left lower leg. Larson grabbed a steel stool and sat down so he would be close to Danny. Danny turned his head toward Larson, but that seemed to hurt, and he closed his eyes. "Thank God," he said. "The other cops seem to think I'm a drunk driver or something." "Talk to me, Danny, and I'll talk to them." "Fucking admirer did it," he said. "He ran you off the road like Melanie?" "No, he did something to the car. I couldn't stop it." "How do you know admirer did it?" "I'm fucking psychic, John. Now, will you talk to those goddamn cops and do something about this? My leg hurts like hell, and I'm tired of being treated like a criminal." "What happened?" "I was coming back from the valley, and my brakes went at the top of the ridge. I remembered these friends' house with a tennis court, so I just aimed the car at the court, and the fence stopped me." "Smart move," Larson said. "You just take it easy and get some rest, okay? I'll come and see you tomorrow." "Thanks, John. Is Chris here?" "She's outside with Melanie." "Will you take care of her tonight? Melanie has to go home to her kids." "Sure. Don't worry about Chris." Larson walked back to where Chris and Melanie were waiting. "Danny's going to be fine," he said. "He's got a broken shin bone and some bruising, and they're going to keep him overnight for observation. But tomorrow, he'll be his old self." "Thank God," Chris said. "Why was he so anxious to talk to you?" "Melanie, why don't you go on home? I'll take care of Chris." "Chris," the secretary said, "I'll be glad to stay if you need me." "It's all right, Melanie. Go home to your kids." Melanie took her leave, and Larson led Chris to his car. "Danny thinks that admirer screwed up the brakes on his car," Larson said. "Do you think admirer did it?" "I've had his car impounded, and we're going to find out. In the meantime, you're going to stay with me tonight." "I better go by the house and get some things." Do you mind if I lend you something to sleep in? I'd just as soon not go back to your place right now. Do you think Admirer is still watching it? I don't know, but let's proceed on the basis that he is. Well, you certainly have sneaky ways to get a girl to stay over. Couldn't pass up an opportunity like this. I'm glad, she said. 4 cars back in the traffic behind them, a red motorcycle kept pace with them all the way to Santa Monica. Larson led Chris into his house and switched on the lights in the living room. He hung his jacket and pistol in the hall closet, then led her to the counter that separated the living room from the kitchen and helped her onto a bar stool. Can I get you a drink? God, could I use one. Got any bourbon? Sure. Rocks only, please. He poured them both a drink and touched her glass with his. Better times than these, he said. He took some steaks from the freezer and put them in the microwave to thaw. How do you like your beef? Medium rare. I'm glad you're not a vegetarian. We'd have to order in a pizza. A steak sounds good. She took another sip of her drink. By the way, I meant to ask you about your subcontractors, Larson said. Any of them you particularly like? Well, I've met most of them, I guess, but my instructions have always gone through Mike Moskowitz to them, so I haven't dealt directly with any of them. I see. Except the burglar alarm guy. Oh? Yeah, his name is Mel something or other. I met him out at the house and went through the whole place to decide what I needed in the way of window and screen sensors and smoke alarms and panic buttons and all that stuff. He was very good about explaining it all, and I'm satisfied that I'm getting the right system. This was before your accident. Yes, just a few days. What did he look like? Oh, about my height, I guess, 5'8" or 9, well-built, sandy hair. She stopped, and her mouth dropped open. Oh, my God. What? He's Admirer, isn't he? Jesus, you're too sharp for me. When are you going to arrest him? Hang on, I'm not in the least certain that he's our man. Not yet. I've got to get his fingerprints to compare to the one we found in the Millman house. Why don't you just drag him in and fingerprint him, then sweat the whole story out of him? You've been seeing too many old movies. But you know all this stuff he's done, don't you? Sure, but I can't prove he's the same guy who did it. Bastard, she said vehemently. Tell me, did he do the system for the Bel Air house, too? No, that was already installed when Brad and I bought it. It's never worked properly, either. And after all that's happened, I was thinking of calling Mel to fix it. She laughed. How about that? It's not a bad idea, Larson mused. What? Invite him to the house? Let me think about it. We might be able to turn such a visit to our advantage. The microwave beeped, and Larson took out the steaks. These are ready for the grill, I think. You hungry? Always, she said. They ate their steaks hungrily with a salad and a bottle of California Cabernet, avoiding the subjects of Admirer, Danny's accident, or anything that might ruin their dinner. Does the movie actress thing make you at all uncomfortable? She asked suddenly. It did. A little at first, he admitted. Less so now. Good. It's an artificial barrier, and I don't want barriers between us. You'll have to admit we live in different worlds, he said. If we're both reasonably successful at our careers, I'll end up with a pension in 8 more years, and you'll make millions. Let's cross that bridge when we come to it, she said. I guess if you're going to cross a bridge, that's the time to do it, he agreed. There's another bridge we have to cross, she said, slipping an arm around his waist. And I think it's time we did it. We seem to keep getting interrupted, he said. Not tonight, she murmured, kissing him. They stood with their arms around each other, becoming more and more aroused. I can't find my way to the bedroom, she whispered. You'll have to lead the way. He swept her into his arms and carried her across the house to the bedroom, then set her on the bed. Larson sat on the bed and buried his face in her breasts. He was quickly naked, and he helped her with her jeans. Then they were stretched out on the bed, whispering to each other, kissing, caressing. She reached across his body and pulled him on top of her, then guided him inside her. Larson took a deep breath, and before he could let it out, the window next to the bed caved inward with a roar, and surrounded by thousands of shards of glass, an 18-inch wide slab of flagstone crashed onto the bed next to them. Chris screamed, and Larson rolled off the bed, taking her with him, landing on his back, with her weight crushing the broken glass into him. Larson turned and shoved her under the bed. "Stay there and don't come out until I tell you to," he whispered. He got to his feet, scooping up his trousers as he ran across the glass shards. He got quickly into his pants and tore toward the front door, ignoring the pain in his back and feet. From outside, he heard a motorcycle engine leap to life and the gears engage. His unmarked patrol car was at curbside, and Larson dived into it, key at the ready. It started instantly, and he was off down the street after the disappearing motorcycle. Then he felt a series of hard bumps and heard the sound of metal grating on concrete. The car was hardly moving. Swearing, he got out and walked around the car. All 4 tires had been slashed to ribbons. Larson greeted Mike Moskowitz and walked him to the bedroom. Outside, a police mechanic had jacked up the patrol car and was changing the wheels. "I hadn't expected to call you this soon," Larson said, pointing at the window. The large flagstone still lay on the floor. "This have something to do with what you came to see me about?" Moskowitz asked. "Yeah." "You said somebody was bothering Chris Callaway?" "She was here last night." Moskowitz looked at the floor. "Look, I didn't realize this was so serious. I'm afraid I wasn't very cooperative when we talked." "Are you feeling more cooperative now?" "I've been thinking. There's a couple of my subs who've got a van like mine. One of them strikes me as, well, a little odd." "Which one?" "Name's Mel Parker. He's doing the security system for the house." "What's odd about him?" "Well, I don't know. He's a pleasant enough guy, but..." "But what?" "He's just a little creepy." "How do you mean?" "He's got dead eyes." Larson paused. "What do you mean?" "Well, you remember that guy who shot Reagan a few years back?" "Yeah." "And the guy who shot John Lennon? They both had dead eyes." "Describe them." "Well, it's like no matter what expression is on their faces, their eyes always look the same, expressionless, dead." Larson knew what the builder meant. He had seen them often enough in mugshots. Moskowitz looked at the shattered window. "I wish I'd told you sooner. I hope I haven't said something about an innocent man." "Don't worry, nobody's going to bother him until we're sure he's our man." The 2 men shook hands, then left the house. Larson stood and marveled at Danny DeVere's car. How the hell could anybody survive that? He asked Bernie, the chief police mechanic. "The car did what it was supposed to, collapsed in sections. He had his belt on, and maybe most important, he had an airbag," Bernie said. "What did you find?" "There was a hole, like a pinhole, in the hydraulic line to the brakes. Every time he used the brakes, he'd squirt out some more fluid until there wasn't enough left to be effective." Larson nodded. "Anything else?" "The transmission shift cable was gone, and I would say, though I couldn't swear in court, that somebody had cut all but a strand or 2 of the cable. When the driver is up there at the top of Beverly Glen and his brakes don't work, he gets a little panicky, maybe a lot panicky, and he yanks the gear level around trying to slow the car down, and the last of the cable snaps." "You're saying we're not going to get anybody for doing this?" "You may get him. You're not going to prove it. The car's just too much of a mess." Larson sat at his desk and pondered how to proceed. Finally, he picked up the phone and dialed. "Keyhole Security," a woman's voice answered. "Mel Parker, please." "May I say who's calling?" A prospective customer? Tell him Mike Moskowitz referred me to him." "Just a moment." Parker came on the line. "Hello? Morning. I'm looking for a burglar alarm, and Mike Moskowitz recommended you." "That's nice of Mike," Parker said. "Mr. Larson, John Larson." There was a long pause on the other end. "Right, Mr. Larson," Parker said, finally, his voice steady. "What sort of system did you have in mind?" "Something pretty comprehensive." "Home or business?" "Home." "Why don't I come and take a look at your situation?" "Perfect." Larson gave him the address. "Are you available around 6? "Absolutely perfect." "I know the street," Parker said. "I'll see you at 6. "I'll look forward to it," Larson said. When he put down the phone, his hand was trembling. Melvin James Parker stood on the opposite side of the screen door and looked at Larson. "Hi," he said. "I'm Mel Parker." His gaze was, as Moskowitz had described it, flat and dead. Larson pushed open the screen and let him into the house. Neither man offered to shake hands. "Nice place," Parker said, looking around. "Thanks. So, what do we need here?" "Why don't you tell me?" He followed Parker at a discreet distance while the man wandered around the house, inside and out, and made notes on a clipboard. Parker was not a large man, but he was well built, with the look of someone who'd gotten his physique from hard work, not lifting weights in a gym. In spite of his defective gaze, he was not an unattractive person. He was cool, too, Larson had to concede. To walk right in here and pretend he didn't know who he was talking to took a tightly controlled psyche. When they were back where they started, Parker sat at the bar and worked up his estimate. Larson stood in the kitchen watching him with real fascination. "How about a beer?" he asked. "Why not? It's the end of my day." "It's closer to the end than you know," Larson thought. He took 2 Carta Blancas from the fridge and grabbed 2 glasses. "No glass for me," Parker said, but it was too late. Larson had already started to pour. Larson shoved the glass across the bar and waited for Parker to pick it up. Parker didn't hesitate. "I think you'll have a hard time beating the price," Parker said. "What business are you in?" "I'm in the cop business," Larson replied. "It's good you realize that even a cop needs security," Parker said. "Even a piece under your arm isn't always enough to protect you." "A cop has a lot more going for him than a piece," Larson said. "Street scum have a way of forgetting that." "Oh, yeah," Parker said, smiling. "You've got all that scientific backup these days, haven't you? Computers and stuff." Larson smiled back. "Mostly we have other cops. Cops don't take it lightly when somebody screws with one of their own." Parker laughed aloud. "One for all and all for one, huh?" He laughed again. "We always laugh last," Larson said. "Always." "Whatever you say," Parker said, glancing at his watch in a manner that was bored and dismissive. "Well, thanks for the beer," he said, standing up and strolling toward the door. "It was the least I could do for the chance to meet you." "Be sure and let me hear from you," Parker said, walking out the door. "Oh, you'll be hearing from me. When you least expect it," Larson called after him. Parker didn't turn, but raised a hand and gave a limp wave. He got into his gray Ford van and drove away. Larson crossed the room quickly. With one finger he tipped Parker's beer glass, then got another finger under the bottom. Using just the 2 fingers, he held the glass up to the light. "Yes!" he shouted. Chris helped Danny check out of the hospital. She told him about Mel Parker. That afternoon, hobbling on crutches, Danny bought a new car, a BMW, and a Smith & Wesson 30H Special with a box of soft-nosed cartridges and a belt holster. In his new car, Danny loaded the pistol and holstered it. He drove back to Santa Monica Boulevard, found keyhole security, and parked the car so that he could see the little parking area in front of the building. The gray Ford van was parked there. All he had to do now was wait. It was after 3 before Larson got a call from the secretary in fingerprinting. "They're back," she said, and hung up. Larson tried to keep from hurrying, but failed. When he arrived at the office, an officer named Elgin was hunched over a light box with a loop. A moment later, Elgin stood up straight. "Congratulations, John," he said. "You got 3 real pretty prints here, first, second, and third fingers." Larson heaved a sigh of relief. "I'll want backup for the arrest," he said. "Hang on," Elgin said. "These are beautiful prints, but they don't match the one from the Millman guest house." "What?" Larson said weakly. "The prints from the glass are not from the same guy as the print from the guest house. Maybe it was the cleaning lady's print or Millman's. Who knows?" Larson tried not to sag. He knew he had turned red. Elgin shrugged. "Sorry, John, I thought you had your man for a minute there." Danny had almost dozed off when he saw the gray van move. It backed out of its place, left the parking lot, and turned west on Santa Monica Boulevard. The van was almost to the beach before Danny caught up with it. At the beach, the van turned left and headed south toward Venice. Danny followed, making certain to stay well back. It finally stopped before a freshly painted bungalow surrounded by a high wrought iron fence. As Danny got closer to the van, an electric gate opened and the van drove into the garage. The gate closed behind it. Danny stopped and waited for Parker to come out of the garage. He wasn't very mobile, so he would call the man to the fence and shoot from the car, a distance of no more than 8 feet. He looked up and saw strands of razor wire entwined in the spires of the iron fence. A sign at the front gate read, "Guard dog on duty." Parker never came out. He must have entered the house directly from the garage. Next door, 2 small boys came outside and began to play with a dog. Cursing, Danny drove away. Later, Danny told Larson and Chris that he had found out where Parker lived. Larson decided to try to force Parker into making a mistake. It was the only way he could think of to get at him. At 7 a.m. the next morning, Larson found the street easily enough. The neighborhood had only begun to stir. A couple of doors from where he was parked, a woman came out on her front porch to collect the morning newspaper. Larson had already cruised the street twice to get a good look at the house. He couldn't recall having seen any house outside of South Central L.A. or Watts that appeared so fortified. It was almost 8:30 before Parker's gates suddenly swung open and the van backed into the street. Danny passed by slowly in his shiny new BMW and took his place beside Larson's car. "Reporting for duty," Danny said, saluting smartly. "I'm going to see if I can work my way in through the back," Larson said. "You go around the block and park 3 or 4 doors down from the house and watch the front." Larson climbed the fence behind the house and used a pair of wire cutters to clip the razor wire at the top. He climbed onto the roof and walked to the nearest skylight. Looking down, he found himself gazing into the uplifted eyes, some 12 feet below him, of the largest Rottweiler he had ever seen. The animal was emitting a low rumble of a growl that he could feel in his fingertips against the skylight. It was going to be necessary to look into the windows from the ground. Taking care to wipe any fingerprints off the skylight, he padded across the roof to the back of the house. He let himself dangle from the gutter for a moment, then dropped the final 6 feet to the ground. He found himself facing the back door, and to the right of that, a good-sized picture window. He happened to be looking directly at the window as it exploded, sending glass everywhere, and the Rottweiler sailed through the air into the backyard. Larson did not hesitate. He ran at the patch of fence from which he had removed the razor wire. He had one leg over the fence when the dog left the ground. Larson had both hands on the top pipe of the fence and one leg over it, but hanging from his leg was 175 pounds of squirming, thrashing beast, jaws fastened on his jeans and not about to let go. Larson felt himself slipping back into the yard. His grip on the fence allowed him to begin swinging his leg. He got the tenacious dog swinging through an arc and finally managed to strike the side of the house with the dog's body. The dog grunted and let go. Larson got his body over the fence and shuffled as quickly as he could toward his car. He started the car and, sucking in deep breaths, drove as slowly away as the adrenaline pumping through his veins would let him. Later, Larson and Danny talked over the aborted raid and tried to come up with another plan. "He's already had one shot at me," Danny said, "and he figures I got lucky. Why don't we persuade him to take another shot?" "That could be very dangerous, Danny." "I don't mind being bait, not if it gives me first dibs on this guy." "Danny, I'll bet he's a homophobe. I bet it would drive him completely nuts if somebody put his hand on his knee." "Danny, I'm liking this more and more." "Danny, you've got a broken leg." "Oh yeah, I forgot." They were both quiet for a while. Frustration was thick in the air. "Maybe there is a way to smoke him out," Larson said. Danny shrugged. "As Ross Perot likes to say, I'm all ears." Mel Parker got to work late the following morning. He'd had to wait for the guy to come and install the new window, this time with a steel frame. He'd had to spend some extra time with Buster, too. The dog was highly strung, and his experience the day before had unsettled the huge animal badly. Still, his security system had worked, and nobody had gotten inside. He wondered how the hell anybody could get away from the dog alive. His morning went well until the mail came. There was a plain, square envelope with no return address. It was postmarked L.A., and it was addressed to him in childlike block capitals. He opened it and read the message inside, which seemed to have been written in crayon or lipstick. It read in its entirety, "I know about you." Sweat broke out on his forehead and under his arms. He turned the page over and looked at the back. Nothing. He examined the envelope again. Cheap dime store paper. He had been very, very careful. He had never been so careful in all his life, and now this? Somebody knew? Who knew? Who could possibly know? He had been too careful for anybody to know. In his mind, he went over every step he had taken, every move he had made, and it was seamless, absolutely seamless. He had fooled them all, and he had made it stick. And now this. Somebody knew. There was a knock on his office door. "Come in." "Package for you, Mel," the man said. "Thanks." Parker waited until the man had gone, then set the box on his desk and opened it. A dozen roses. He found the little envelope with the card. "I know what you did." Parker sat down. His hands were trembling. He could lose the business. All that work, and it could go right down the tube. He got up and began pacing back and forth like some caged animal, trying to think how this could have happened, trying to find his error. But he could not find it. It was seamless. It really was. It was perfect. Perfect. But why this? Why now? Who could possibly know? He raised his head and looked at the card again. "I know what you did." Could it be the cop? How could the cop possibly know? It couldn't be the cop. But he would find out who it was. And he would make him sorry. Danny sat cross-legged on the floor of Chris's study, using one of her lipsticks to write notes to Parker. "How about, I'm going to expose you." "I like it," Chris said. "Do another one." "How about you're going to expose yourself?" The two of them roared with laughter. The phone rang, and Chris picked it up. "Hello?" "Hi, it's John. Any reaction?" "None. Oh, we haven't received any roses today. Not yet, anyway." "Well, that's something, at least. What we need now is some sort of excuse to get you and Parker in the same place in public." "That's easy," Chris said. "The Malibu house is nearly finished, and next week I'm going to throw a party for all the people who've worked on the construction." "Perfect. He won't suspect a thing." "What do you plan to do?" Chris asked. "I'm still working on that," Larson said. "Just make sure you invite Parker." Larson hung up and began going through the material in his inbox. There was a phone message from somebody called Helen Mendelsohn. Who the hell was Helen Mendelsohn? He couldn't remember. He called and left his number on her message machine. He opened an inner office envelope and pulled out a plastic sheet with 3 fingerprints on it. At the top was Parker's name. He looked idly at the prints and thought about them. Parker would have had to be printed by the Santa Monica police when he applied for a license to operate a security business. There was a gap here he hadn't closed. He put the prints back into the envelope, walked it over to the fingerprint department, and left it on Elgin's desk. When he got back to his desk, the phone was ringing. "Hello?" "John, it's Danny. I think you better come over here." "What is it?" He could hear Chris crying in the background. "She's all right, but I'd rather not explain it on the phone." "I'll be there as soon as possible." Larson put the flashing light on top of the car and drove very fast down Sunset to Stone Canyon. He ran up the front steps and walked into the house without ringing the bell. A cardboard gift box was on the floor beside the door, and Larson stopped. This must have been what upset Chris. He tucked a finger under the lid and lifted. A pair of eyes stared at him from the box. It was the severed head of a dog. Parker was opening the mail, and when he got to the plain square envelope, he began to shake. He ripped it open and read the message. "You are disgusting." Parker cringed as though struck. There was a knock on his office door. "Package for you, Mel," a voice said. He went to the door and took the box. He already knew what it contained, but he had to open it. He couldn't help himself. The roses were there. Another note, too. "Filth like you doesn't deserve to live." Parker winced. He opened his office door and threw the flowers down the stairs. Larson was at his desk when Elgin walked in with the result of his fingerprint search. He tossed an envelope onto the desk. "Go figure," he said, and walked out. Larson opened the envelope and removed the report. The fingerprints belonged to one James Melvin Potter. Who the hell was Potter? Go figure, indeed. He turned to his computer, called up the records program, and entered the name. On the screen appeared the face of a much younger Mel Parker. James Melvin Potter had been convicted of child molestation and aggravated assault and sentenced to 5 to 15 years. He had served his whole sentence without parole at an institution for the mentally ill in Northern California and had been released 3 years ago against the recommendation of the director of the institution. Admirer was Parker. Parker was Potter. And now Larson had something on him, though not much. He had falsified his application for a business license, a misdemeanor. Larson could turn him in to the Santa Monica police. His business license would be revoked, and he'd be fined. He'd lose his business, but he would still be on the street. Larson drove to Chris's house. When he arrived, a fire truck was parked out front, and a column of black smoke was rising from a back corner of the house. He saw Chris standing on the lawn with Danny, safe. "I managed to throw some clothes out the window and got the cars out of the garage," Danny was saying. "That's all we saved." "It was an old house," Larson said. "It went up like tinder. I'm sorry you lost so many things, Chris." "I feel stripped bare," Chris said, "absolutely naked. Maybe I'm overreacting, but I feel as though everything has been taken from me." The arson investigator from the fire department found the remains of some sort of timing device, Larson said, and a detonator attached to a 5-gallon can of gasoline. "A timer?" Danny said. "I don't think he meant for it to go off immediately. Something must have gone wrong." "You mean he intended it to go off later?" Chris asked, "like while we were asleep?" "Maybe." "Oh, come on, John," she said. "He was trying to kill us." "John and I thought the dog's head was a death threat," Danny said. "We didn't want to frighten you." "Well, I'm frightened now," she said, and she meant it. "I think we have to treat it as an attempted murder," Larson said. "That's what my report is going to say. Tomorrow we'll find some more secure quarters until the Malibu house is finished. Let's all get some rest. Tomorrow we'll make some moves." The next evening, Larson drove Chris and Danny to the Del Mar Beach Club in Santa Monica. He made Chris lie down in the back seat and covered her with a blanket before they left the garage, and he used every trick in the book to make sure he wasn't followed. Danny and Chris checked into a suite on the top floor. He pulled up in front of an auto painting shop and stopped. He thought about paint, and as he did, he glanced up the street and saw the Ford dealer's sign. Wouldn't hurt to look, he thought. He drove up the street and turned into the lot. A salesman was at the van's door before he could get out. He asked to see some replacement vans, and the salesman said, "I got a couple dozen beauties right over here. Why don't we see if there's something that catches your fancy?" After only a few minutes of haggling over the trade-in value of the gray van, they made their deal on a fancier dark blue van. He signed the documents, reached into a hip pocket of his jeans, extracted a folded stack of bills, and started counting. "Exactly right," the salesman said, counting the money. "You always carry that amount of cash around with you? That's dangerous." "I never met anybody who could take it away from me." He got into the new dark blue van and drove away. The salesman drove the gray van around back to the service department and got out. The service manager opened the rear doors. "Shit, Harry, did you see this before?" The salesman walked around to the back of the van and looked inside. "God damn it! Looks like he's been killing hogs back here. It's been shampooed, I guess, but shampooing wouldn't handle this." "You think it was blood?" the salesman asked. "Should we call the cops?" "Nah, if it's blood, it's from an animal, and I'm not about to get involved with the cops." The salesman wondered what the hell that guy had been doing in the back of his van. Between calls in his office, Larson noticed a hum of activity in homicide. "What's up?" Larson asked, nodding at the busy group of desks. "A lady out for her morning run found a head, up in one of the canyons," an officer said. "Just a head?" "Yeah, a woman apparently in her 20s. Larson went back to his office. The phone rang. Detective Larson. "Mr. Larson, this is Herbert Mendelsohn." There was that name again. Larson struggled to place it. "My daughter was having a problem with a stalker earlier this year." Now he had it. Helen Mendelsohn had been one of his cases. "Is there something I can do for you or Helen?" "I just thought I'd ask your advice." "Of course." "Helen's boss called me this morning and said she didn't show up for work. That's unlike her. So I went over to her apartment." "Was there anything unusual?" "Well, there were some flowers there that had been delivered, still in the box, but no card. Normally Helen would have put flowers in water right away. It's not like her to leave a dozen roses in a box and let them die." Larson felt a trickle of apprehension run down his bowels. "Well, I'll be glad to look into this for you, Mr. Mendelson." "Thank you, I'd appreciate that," Mr. Mendelson said. Larson hung up the phone. "Long shot," he said aloud to himself, "but worth checking on." He had nothing else to do. The apartment was in a small upmarket condominium. It was very neat. It looked more like the show apartment for the condo than a place where somebody lived. The roses were on the living room coffee table. He lifted off the lid with his pen and looked for a card, but there was none. In the woman's bedroom, the clothes were put away perfectly, and the bathroom was spotless. In the kitchen, he checked the refrigerator. On the bottom shelf was a familiar-looking box. Larson slid the shelf out with his pen and flipped up the lid. It was a cat's head this time, and suddenly Larson felt sick about Helen Mendelson. The trip was superfluous, really, but it had to be made. At the city morgue, he showed his badge to an attendant. The head was in a stainless steel drawer in a cold room wrapped in a sheet. The attendant unwrapped it almost tenderly, Larson thought, and when the head was exposed, he knew he didn't need a photograph. He remembered the face well. Mr. Mendelson stood up and paced the room while his wife wept. "These crazy people," he said. "You've got to get them off the streets." "I know," Larson said. "We're trying." Larson stood to go. "There's going to be a lot in the papers and on television about this. I would suggest that you not talk to anybody but the police about what's happened. It would be best if you didn't go to Helen's apartment for a few days." Mendelson offered Larson his hand. "Thank you for coming here personally to tell us," he said. "I'm grateful for that, at least." "I'm very sorry for what's happened," Larson said. "I hope we have a quick resolution." Larson sat in his car for a few minutes, trying not to cry. He hated to cry. Larson decided to stay with Chris at the beach club that night. They would send Danny home. The lobby was deserted with not even a desk clerk in sight, and as Larson rang for the elevator, he was so caught up with the thought of spending a night alone with Chris that he didn't notice the delivery box of flowers lying on the front desk. He didn't know what time it was when he woke, and at first he didn't know what had awakened him. Then he knew. It was the sound of a door latch operating. Opening or closing, he couldn't tell. Slowly, so as not to awaken Chris, he slipped out of bed. He could hear nothing but the wind off the Pacific rattling the window panes. He opened the bedroom door a foot and looked into the living room. His coat was on the coffee table, and the pistol was inside it, still in its holster. He freed the weapon and flipped off the safety. He switched on the lamp. Near the door was a small chest of drawers with a mirror hanging above it. A tube of Chris's lipstick rested on the chest, and there was writing on the mirror in bright red. "You'll never get away from me." Then he looked at the front door and saw that the chain was off the latch. Larson sat and watched Chris sleep in the morning sunlight. She opened her eyes and felt for him. "John," she said sleepily. "I'm here," he said. "I woke up earlier than you, so I got dressed. Come on, I'll buy you a good breakfast." "We've got some cereal here." "I'm hungrier than that. Anyway, it's time we got out of this place." "Well, where will we go?" "Back to my house." "He'll find us there, won't he?" "I've begun to think that he'll find us anywhere, so what the hell. I'm going to stay with you from now on, so if he finds us, it's okay with me." All he wanted was one clean shot at the bastard. "We're getting awfully bold, aren't we?" "We're going to be bold from now on." The son of a bitch had been there when they were making love, and Larson was going to find a way to kill him for it. Fuck probable cause. His house was as they had left it. Chris's Mercedes was parked at the curb. He made scrambled eggs and smoked salmon for them and opened a bottle of champagne and mixed it with orange juice. Larson thought about admirers' uncanny ability to find them wherever they were, and he decided there was nothing uncanny about it. He went into the garage and slid his shop jack under his car. He got a work light and crawled underneath. He found it stuck magnetically to the body, just a little plastic box with a short antenna. He drove the Mercedes into the garage and found another black box. No doubt there was one on Danny's new car as well. He went into his book-lined study and made a phone call to a man he knew who specialized in exotic electronics. "Jim, it's John Larson. How are ya?" "I'm okay, John. What's up?" "I found a bug on my car." "Sound or location?" "Location. Maybe sound, too." "What do you want to do about it?" "I want to be able to disable it at will without actually removing it." "You mean you want it to work sometimes but not others?" "That's right. Here's what you do." His friend explained how to confuse the bug by using the car radio, and Larson found some wire and some switches in his tool chest, then went to work. Danny picked up Larson and Chris later in the morning, and they went shopping. They had an early dinner at Valentino's, then drove back to Santa Monica. It was after dark when, exhausted, they returned to Larson's house where Danny dropped them. Larson didn't tell him about the bug on his car. There was time for that, if it became necessary. Larson unlocked the front door. "What's that smell?" Chris asked. "Your sense of smell is better than mine," he said, switching on a light. He stopped. There was someone seated at the little writing desk in the living room. "What's wrong?" Chris asked. "Nothing's wrong," he said, steering her toward the bedroom. "I've just remembered that I have to meet with some other cops here. Come on, you're exhausted. Let's get you into bed, and we'll try not to keep you awake." This is the end of side 3. He settled her in the bedroom and went back to the living room. She was sitting at the desk, neatly dressed, her legs crossed, hands folded in her lap, handbag sitting on the floor beside her. He picked up the telephone. "This is Larson. Get me Martinez and homicide." Martinez sounded sleepy. "Yeah. Al, it's John Larson. I think you'd better come over to my house. The rest of Helen Mendelsohn is turned up." "Where?" "In my living room." He sat down to wait with Helen Mendelsohn for the cavalry to arrive. They came in force. Beverly Hills PD homicide, the medical examiner, a photographer, an ambulance with 2 attendants, and finally Santa Monica PD homicide. Larson kept them as quiet as he could. "Now, what the hell is this all about?" Martinez said. "I told you I was working on a stalker," Larson said. "Yeah, now, tie it all together for me." The Santa Monica man spoke up. "Yeah, tie it all together for me, too. What the fuck are you guys doing working a homicide on my turf?" Martinez turned to the man. "The homicide occurred on my turf, night before last, and we've got the head down at the morgue with our tag on it, okay?" "Well, we've got a lot more than a head," the Santa Monica man said. "We've got legs and arms and a torso, and that's a hell of a lot more than a head." "It didn't happen here," Larson explained. "It happened in Beverly Hills, so it's our case." Okay, the Santa Monica detective said. "You work it, I'll watch. You screw it up, and I'll go get my chief." "Right," Larson said. "I'm working a stalker case, anonymous, bothering a young woman for some time now. Flowers, notes, then recently it got more serious. Picture of open-heart surgery and a dog's head in a gift box." "A real dog's head?" "Right. And now there's flowers and a cat's head in Helen Mendelsohn's refrigerator, so I think we've got the same M.O. going." "You got a lead on the guy?" asked Martinez. "It's very tenuous. What it boils down to is we think the perp, who styles himself admirer, drives a gray Ford van and a red motorcycle. My complainant is building a house, and one of the subcontractors has the same van and all the skills necessary to do what admirer has been doing. But I can't prove it was him, and I don't have probable cause to arrest him. Why don't we have a talk with him? Martinez said. If you do that, Al, he's going to pull back into his shell. We'll have nothing but a bad arrest. I want him free to make a mistake so I can nail him. He's also free to do this again, Martinez said, nodding at Helen Mendelssohn's corpse. I have a theory about that, Larson said. I think he got frustrated dealing with my complainant, and he killed Helen Mendelssohn to relieve the pressure. I think he'll be okay for long enough for me to make the case. Can you imagine what the chief is going to say to us if the guy decapitates another woman? Martinez said. I'm setting something up, and in a few days, I think I'll have him. What's his name? Martinez asked. I'm going to hang on to that for the time being, Larson said. I don't want him rousted till I'm ready. That's a lot of responsibility to take, John. Sure you don't want some help? Do I get to say exactly how much help? Martinez sighed. Okay, you call it. Okay. His name is Melvin James Parker, a.k.a. James Melvin Potter. He did time for child molestation, was released 3 years ago. He changed his name and started a security business. I can only spare 2 guys, but I can put a man on his house and his business, Martinez said. I don't suppose you got a motive? Yeah, I have. I think he killed her to piss me off. What? I've been covering the other case very tightly, and I've gotten in his way. Helen was an old target of his, one he dropped for some reason. But he figured I'd been on the case. That's why he left the body here. He wants to piss me off. Strange motive, Martinez said. Did it work? It sure did, Larson said. I don't know when I've been more pissed off. The Santa Monica detective spoke up. Tell you what, you guys work this one. I'm out of here. The next afternoon, while Chris was taking a nap, Larson found Danny stretched on the living room sofa reading a magazine. He pulled up a chair. We better talk while Chris is asleep, Larson said. Okay, Danny replied. This is what I want to do tomorrow evening. We'll take 2 cars to the party, Chris's and my MG. It starts at 6, so I'll stay there until the party begins to thin out a little. Then I'll say I have to work that evening, and I'll leave the party and drive away. I'll go just far enough to be out of sight of the house, then I'll park the car and make my way back up the beach. What I want you to do is, late in the party, go out onto the deck and let down the folding ladder to the beach. Then turn off the deck lights and close the sliding doors to discourage anybody from coming out there. Then I want you to leave. You mean leave her there all alone? Wait until there's only a couple or 2, then go. Make some excuse about having to buy groceries or booze or something. Get into Chris's car and drive toward Malibu. On the left-hand side of the dash and underneath, there's a little black switch. Switch it to the opposite direction. What's that for? It's a bug that lets him know where we are. The switch will interfere with the bug. What if when I go, one of the few people left is Mel Parker? That's the tricky part. You're just going to have to go. Don't go far. Do the same thing I'm going to do. Come back to the house along the beach and stay out on the deck with me. There's a little shed out there for storing deck furniture. Meet me behind the shed. We won't be seen from the house even if somebody should come out onto the deck. What then? I'm going out to the house tonight and plant some small transmitters there. We'll hear what's happening inside the house. Chris will have a code word. When she uses that, we bust in. John, what if this plan of yours doesn't work tomorrow evening? I don't know, Danny. I honestly don't. Maybe I'll let you kill Parker. That would be my pleasure, Danny said. They gathered in Larson's living room, ready to travel to Malibu. Larson took Chris's hand. Chris, Danny and I are both going to leave the party toward the end." "What?" "We're going to wait until the crowd has started to thin out, then drive in opposite directions down the beach, then walk back to the house and go up the steps to the deck." "Does that mean I'm going to be alone with Parker?" "I want you to hold at least one couple there until we've had time to get into place. I'll be able to hear everything that goes on in the house over this." He held up the little receiver. "We've got to make Parker believe that you're going to be alone for a few minutes. You won't be. He just has to believe it. Danny and I will be on the deck listening. If you say the words, 'You must be crazy,' then we'll be all over you, but we'll wait for that signal." "You must be crazy," Chris said. "That's right." "It certainly is." "You have your pistol?" "Right here. And it's probably ruining the line of my pants." "If I'm alone with him, what do I do?" "Get him to talk and keep him talking. If you can get him to talk about what he's been doing, Danny and I will hear it, and he will have incriminated himself. Then we can get search warrants for his home and business, and we'll probably find physical evidence that will connect him with the crimes. When that happens, he's out of your life, I promise you." "Then it's worth going through this," Chris said resolutely. They arrived at the house as the caterers were unloading food and champagne, and Larson took the head woman aside. "As soon as you've set everything up, you can leave," he said. "Don't you want us to serve?" the woman asked. "No, that won't be necessary. Just set it all up on the tables and the guests will help themselves." "Whatever you say," the woman replied, then went about her work. Larson walked around the house, checking to see that the bugs were still in place. They were visible, but just barely, since there was no wiring. He walked out onto the deck and checked the reception with his receiver. It was perfect. The sun was sinking slowly toward the horizon, but they had another 2 hours of daylight. He turned back into the house. It was time to socialize. The first subcontractor to arrive was Jimmy, the plumber, with his wife and teenage daughter. Right after him came Mike Moskowitz and his wife, and Bud Carson the framer, the electrical man, and a flood of laborers, most with their wives or girlfriends. Then young Lenny Moskowitz arrived and found himself a beer. They were a good hour into the party before Mel Parker appeared at the door. Larson was standing nearby, but he ignored Parker and left it to Mike Moskowitz to greet him. "Glad you made it back in time," the builder said. "Me too," Parker said. "I had to come from Oakland, but the traffic wasn't too bad. You got finished, huh?" "Well, as finished as you can get before the owner moves in. And there she is. Come and say hello." "Sure." Chris was talking with a young couple about the intricacies of electrical wiring when she saw two shapes approach and heard Mike's voice. "Chris, you remember Mel Parker? He did your security system?" "Of course," Chris said brightly, sticking out her hand in Parker's direction. When he took it, she worked hard not to cringe. "The place is looking beautiful," Parker said. "Mike has done a terrific job." "He tells me you've done a good job, too," Chris said. "I'll feel a lot safer knowing your equipment is at work and your people are listening for my call," she lied. "That's our job," Parker said. "You making any new movies these days?" "Bastard," she thought. "You know I can't see to do my work and you're rubbing it in." "I have a new project in development right now, as a matter of fact. Well, I can't talk about it until we've signed contracts, but if all goes well, I expect we'll start shooting early next year." "Can't wait to see it," Parker said. "Excuse me, I think I'll get some champagne." He moved off toward the bar table. Danny approached Larson and handed him a fresh glass of champagne. "I've let down the stairs from the deck. When do we move?" he asked. "Not yet. Still too many people here." The party was an hour and a half old now, and he saw a few people approach Chris to thank her before leaving. Soon, from the look of it. Yeah, once a few people leave, everybody will get the idea. They watched, and Danny had been right. The rush to leave was on. Soon, only a dozen or so people were left, including Moskowitz and Mel Parker. Larson handed his glass to Danny. "I'll go first," he said. "You follow when we're down to half a dozen people." Parker was not talking to Chris now, but he was at the bar only a few steps away, pouring himself another glass of champagne. Larson approached Chris. "I better get going," he said, sure that Parker could hear him. "Oh, can't you stay a while longer?" Chris asked plaintively. "The sunset is going to be marvelous." "I'm sorry, but I've got to go to a meeting at the office. My boss insists. I should be through by 10 or so if you want to have a late dinner." "Okay, I'll wait for you here." Larson shook Mike Moskowitz's hand, then left the house. Danny wandered out onto the deck, looked to make sure he was alone, then lowered the stairs to the beach. On his way back in, he stopped and chatted with the framer, Bud Carson. Larson got into the car, took the small receiver out of his pocket, placed it on the seat beside him, and turned it on. A babble of sound hit him, and he turned down the instrument. Jim had been right. This equipment wasn't good enough to distinguish among a lot of voices. He started the car and with some difficulty maneuvered around a dark blue van parked behind him. He had seen that van before somewhere. He made a mental note of the license plate number. He pulled out into traffic and drove back toward Los Angeles. Suddenly, Danny's voice was loud and clear. "Chris, I have to run to the drugstore in Malibu Village. Will you be all right for half an hour?" Danny had made sure to stand near the living room bug. Chris's voice was lost in the babble, but Larson didn't need to hear it. A couple of 100 yards down the beach, he began looking for a break in the houses so that he could go through to the beach. There was none. Malibu property was too valuable to allow for gaps between the houses. Larson knew he was getting to be too far from the house. He began to become alarmed. He pulled over, stopped, and reached into the glove compartment for the little Radio Shack CB transmitter. "Danny? It's John. Do you read me?" There was some crackling, and then Danny's voice came back weakly. "Yeah, I'm here, John." "Where are you?" "Down the road a few 100 yards from the house. I can't find a way to get down to the beach." "I'm having the same problem. There's a restaurant down your way. See if you can get through that. Crawl out a window if you have to." "Over and out," Danny said. Larson pulled his car right up to the nearest house. He got out and rang the front doorbell. A man in a bathrobe came to the door, and Larson flashed his badge. "I'm a police officer. I need to get to the beach. May I go through your house?" "Let's see some ID with a picture," the man said. Larson produced a plastic ID. He was now very worried that he had been gone too long. The man examined it carefully and compared the photograph to Larson's face. "You got a warrant to enter my house?" Larson shoved the man aside. "I haven't got time for this. I'm coming through." "Hey, I'll call the cops!" the man yelled after him. "I'm the cops," Larson said, finding the kitchen. There had to be a way out of here. He found a deck with a stair arrangement similar to Chris's, got the steps down, and ran down to the beach. "Fucking cops!" the man yelled after him from the deck. "That was unconstitutional!" Larson ignored him and started to run. Chris was talking with Jimmy, the plumbing contractor, and his wife, who had both had a lot of champagne and were very merry. "Listen, I could tell you stories about my clients," Jimmy was saying. "People will say and do anything around a plumber. We're like cab drivers. People act like you're not even there, you know?" "I can imagine," Chris said. She had been keeping an eye on Mel Parker's shape. He had never left the bar, and he seemed to be in conversation with another shape. Mike Moskowitz appeared at her elbow. "Well, folks, it's getting time to call it a night," he said. Chris felt for his arm and whispered into his ear, "Mike, don't let Parker leave. If he starts to go, tell him I want to talk to him about some more security stuff. Then you go, too." "You sure?" Moskowitz asked. "I'm sure." She turned to Jimmy and his wife. "Please excuse the whispering. Just some last-minute business." "No problem," Jimmy said. "Well, we'd better get going." "I'll drive," his wife said. "Whatever you say, sweetheart." Moskowitz saw them to the door, then came back to Chris. "Mel," he called, "Chris wanted a word with you." He leaned into Chris. "You're sure?" "I'm sure. Don't worry." She saw a shape approaching. "Well, I'm off," Mike said. "I think we're all ready for your move tomorrow, Chris. Should we come and clean up the bottles and leftover food?" "Don't worry about it, Mike. The caterers will be in tomorrow morning to clean it up." "Good night, then," Moskowitz said. Chris heard the front door close behind him. Now she was alone with Mel Parker. Down the beach, Danny was arguing with the restaurant manager. "All I want to do is get down to the beach," he said. "I'm sorry, sir, but we have an agreement with our neighbors that we won't allow the public to get to the beach through our establishment. The goodwill of our neighbors is very important to us. I'm sure you understand." "I understand," Danny said, "but you don't understand. I have to get to the beach. Someone's life may depend on it." "Sir," the manager said, "I hear all sorts of excuses from people who want to get to the beach and peep into the stars' homes, but I just cannot allow it. Now, if you'll go down the road another mile or so, there's the pier, and you can reach the beach from there." "I don't have time for that," Danny said. "Well, I'm sorry, but if you want to get onto Malibu Beach, you're going to have to take the time to go through a public area, and this is not a public area." Danny rose to his full 5 feet 5 inches. "Mister," he said, "I'm going to the beach, out your back door, and if I can't go around you, I'll go through you." "Just try it, pal," the manager said. Larson tried to pace himself. He had started his run at least a mile from the house, and it had been a long time since he had run a mile. The tide was out, and he kept to the wet sand where the going was easier. As he jogged along, he reached into his pocket for the receiver and switched it on. He heard Moskowitz's voice clearly saying goodnight. Chris was alone with Parker. Larson picked up the pace a notch. "Don't sprint," he told himself. "If you do, you'll never make it." He thought he could see the house up ahead. "Anything I can do for you?" Parker asked. Chris tried to keep her breathing normal. I've been having a rather unusual security problem," she said. "I was wondering if you might have some ideas how to solve it." "Probably," Parker replied. "Somebody been bothering you?" "Sort of," she said. "Actually, he seems like the sort of guy I might like to know if the circumstances were a little different." "If you want to know him better, then why do you need more security?" I think I may have given him the wrong impression. You see, early on, I involved the police when that may not have been the right thing to do." "You mean your buddy Larson?" "Yes, and now I don't seem to be able to get rid of him." "Would you like me to get rid of him for you?" Parker asked. "How would you go about that?" she asked. She was standing where she had been told to. She hoped to God that Larson could hear her, that he was on the deck. "I could handle that for you," Parker said. The lights suddenly went off in the house. Down the beach, Larson was 100 yards from the house when he saw the lights go off. What the hell? Every light in the place had been on so that the wives could see the whole house, and every light had gone off all at once. Either the main breaker had popped or someone had thrown the main switch. He was nearly winded now, but he tried to run faster. "What happened?" Chris asked. "Looks like the main breaker went," Parker said. "There's enough light from the sunset, though." There wasn't enough light to suit Chris. Her eyes didn't adjust to changes in light as rapidly as they used to, and she was now virtually in the dark. She looked toward the windows. The sunset was a dim radiance surrounded by a deep gray. "Can't you fix it?" she asked. "I can't see very well at this light level." "I could," Parker said, "but I sort of like it like this." "Please," she said, "please go and fix it." "Oh, all right," Parker said. "I'll be right back." He walked away from her. Chris stood, trembling in the dark. She put her hands in her pockets and felt for the little pistol. It was there, warm from her body heat. Then she was startled by a hand on her shoulder. Larson reached the house, panting, gasping for breath. He paused for a moment, resting his hands on his knees, then looked for the steps to the deck. They weren't there. Larson looked up at the deck, panicked. Then he heard Chris's voice, loud and clear over the receiver. "You must be crazy," she said. Feeling his way in the dark under the deck, Larson looked for a gap where he could reach the front of the house, but felt nothing but siding and shingles. He ran back onto the beach and looked both ways. As far as he could see, houses stretched into the distance. There were no breaks between them and no access from the beach. Chris was spun around by the hand on her shoulder. "What are you doing?" she asked. The lights were still off, and she could barely distinguish a shape in front of her. A voice whispered,
"I thought it was time. You and I were alone together."
The hair stood up on the back of her neck. "Maybe it is time at that. Where have you been?"
"I've been here all along."
"Why are you whispering now?" she asked. "Why can't you speak like a man?"
"I like to whisper. It's more intimate."
"Funny. You haven't been acting like a man who wants intimacy. In fact, I'd say you've been behaving like a man who's afraid of women." Suddenly, he took hold of her hair, and for the first time he spoke in something like a normal voice. "You think I'm afraid of you, huh? I think I'll show you just how unafraid of you I am." Chris spoke very loudly and distinctly. "You must be crazy!" she said. He backhanded her hard across the face. Chris struggled to get closer to him, but he was holding her at a distance by her hair. He slapped her again. "Don't like to get close to a woman, huh?" she said, grabbing hold of his shirt. She tried to pull herself closer to him, but he was too strong for her. "Go ahead," she said. "Take me in your arms." He reached out and circled an arm around her waist. Then he released her hair and put his other arm around her, pulling her tight against him, squeezing the breath out of her. Chris found his face with one hand. "At last, you son of a bitch!" Chris screamed. She drew back with her other hand, made a fist, and as hard as she could, jammed her thumb into his right eye. He screamed and stepped back from her. Chris went for the gun in her pocket. Larson heard a man scream. Then 4 loud pops erupted from above, and Larson didn't need the radio to hear them. He threw down the receiver, leapt at one of the pilings supporting the deck, and began shinnying up it. Splinters stabbed at his hands and legs, but he kept at it, moving slowly up the piling. There was a horizontal support a few feet above him. If he could grab that, he could hoist himself onto it and then reach the floor of the deck. He kept climbing. Something struck Chris's wrist, and the pistol flew away from her hand. Hadn't she hit him with any of her shots? He grabbed her again, and she managed to get hold of his hair with her right hand. She made a fist of her left and jammed the thumb into his left eye. He screamed again, then jerked his head from her grasp and moved to one side to avoid another blow, putting himself between the sunset and Chris. Now she could see his shape silhouetted against the dying sun. She could see that his hands were at his face and that his feet were spread apart. "Now you're blinder than I am, aren't you, you son of a bitch?" She took one step toward him and kicked upward with all her strength, screaming with the effort. Her foot caught him full in the crotch, and his hands left his face and grabbed at the new pain. Reaching out for him, Chris found his head. She grabbed his hair with both hands and pulled his face down to meet her rising knee, and she felt the blood seep through the silk pants she was wearing. A howl of pain and anger rose from the man, and he staggered through the open sliding doors onto the deck, straightening up. As he did, she saw something bright in his hand. The man started toward her. Larson reached painfully up for the horizontal timber and got a grip that allowed him to get both hands on it. He hoisted himself up, got a knee on it, then stood. His head was now at deck level. He saw the shape of a man in the fading light, and he was holding the biggest knife Larson had ever seen. He reached for his pistol, and at that moment another shape rocketed out of the house and onto the deck, colliding with the knife-wielding man and shoving him forcefully back toward the railing. The railing gave way from the weight of both of them, and the two shapes, locked together, plummeted toward the rocks 20 feet below them. Larson put the pistol on the deck and hoisted himself up. He grabbed the weapon and ran toward the broken railing. Chris dropped to her hands and knees and felt for her pistol. Something was going on, but she couldn't tell what. Then she found the gun. As Larson reached the gap in the railing, a flash erupted inside the house, and he felt something hum past his ear. He spun around. "No, Chris!" he shouted. "It's John!" She was crouched in a firing position as he had taught her, the pistol held out in front of her with both hands. She stopped shooting. "Easy," he said. "It's all right now." He started toward her. Then he was stooped in his tracks by the sound of a gunshot behind him. He turned and ran back toward the broken railing. As he did, another shot erupted, then another. Larson looked over the edge and in the dim light saw a man with a gun standing, straddling another who was prone on the rocks. "Freeze! Police!" he shouted. The man with the gun turned and looked up at the deck. "Drop the weapon now or I'll fire!" Larson shouted. "Jesus, John, it's me," a voice said. "Danny? You were expecting the cavalry?" "Don't shoot anymore," Larson said. "I don't think I'll have to," Danny said. "Stay right there. I'll be with you in a minute." "Chris?" He went back into the house and gathered her in his arms. "What happened?" Chris asked. "It was Danny," Larson replied. "He's taking care of Parker. It's all over." He held her at arm's length and looked at her. "Are you all right?" "I want some light," she said. "Stay right there." Larson ran into the back hallway, found the main switch box and the master switch. The lights came on, and he went back into the living room. "I'm going to go down to the beach and check on Danny," he said. "Don't go onto the deck. The railing's broken." "I'll wait here," she said. Larson went out onto the deck, lowered the stairs, and ran down them. Danny and Parker were only a few feet in front of him. "Are you all right, Danny?" he asked as he reached the smaller man's side. "I'm just fine," Danny said, pointing with his pistol. "He took the force of the fall." "Did you have to shoot him?" Larson asked quietly. Danny turned and looked at him. "You're damn right I did." "All right, listen to me. You ran out onto the deck and shot him there, understand?" "What's the difference?" "The difference between justifiable homicide and second-degree murder. The difference between no charges and 20 years in San Quentin. Do we understand each other?" "Perfectly," Danny said. He looked down at the body at his feet. "I wish I could see him better." "You can see him well enough to know that his mother wouldn't recognize him," Larson said. "You put 3 into his face. He's a mess." "I'm glad," Danny said. "I hope to God he was alive when I shot him." "What took you so long to get here?" Larson asked. "I tried to get to the beach through the restaurant down the road, but the manager was a little tougher than I counted on. So I got in the car and drove back here as fast as I could. I came through the front door and I saw Parker on the deck with a knife." "I saw the rest," Larson said. "You were great, but remember what I said about where you shot him." "I'll remember." "I gotta call this in," Larson said. "Will you wait here, and if any neighbors turn up, keep them away from Parker." "Sure," Danny said, sitting down on a boulder. "You go ahead. Admirer and I will be just fine." Larson took the gun from Danny's hand and climbed back up the stairs. He went to Chris and took the pistol from her and put it in his pocket. "Parker's dead," he said. "It's finally all over." Then they were both startled by a man's voice. "Will somebody tell me what the hell's going on?" Larson turned and looked toward the living room door. Mel Parker was standing there, leaning against the door jamb and rubbing the back of his neck. The house was full of people again. The local cops had brought in everything they had, and there were flash bulbs popping, ambulance lights flashing, and of course the blue lights of the squad cars out front. The only furniture in the house was some chairs rented for the party, and Danny DeVere, composed and relaxed, sat on one facing a homicide detective. "Now, let me get this straight," the detective was saying. "Would you like me to go through it again?" "Please." "I came back into the house through the front door in time to see this guy stagger out onto the deck. The sliding doors were open. When he straightened up, he had a knife in his hand, and he was moving toward Chris. I ran between them and fired 3 times at the guy." "How close to him were you?" "I'm not sure. Pretty close," he shrugged. "It all happened so fast." "And where did you aim?" "I didn't aim, exactly. I just pointed the gun at him and pulled the trigger 3 times. He went backwards through the railing and landed on the beach." Larson broke off his conversation with another detective and approached. "I can confirm all that," he said. "I was climbing up to the deck from the beach, and I got my head above deck level just as he fired." He handed the detective Danny's gun. "Have you found out who he is yet?" "They'll search the body for ID as soon as the medical examiner is finished with him." As if on cue, a man carrying a black bag entered the room from the deck. "Okay, it's all yours," he said. "Cause of death?" the detective asked. "You got your choice of 2, either the 3 bullets in the head or the smashed skull on the rocks. One eye was shot through and the other was ruptured by some injury." "Which happened first?" "Impossible to say. The head injury and the gunshots probably occurred within seconds of each other. The eye injury could have occurred either before or after." "Thanks, Doc." The detective turned back to Larson. "Okay, we've got the knife and they're taking prints from it, but as far as I can see, this was a clean kill. I'll file my report to state no further interest from this department." "Thanks," Larson said. "By the way," the detective said, pointing across the room, "we got 4 small-caliber slugs in the wall over there." Larson looked at the wall. He had forgotten about the shots he'd heard. "Miss Callaway has a small-caliber handgun," he said. "Nice grouping," the detective replied. Another detective entered the house from the deck, holding a plastic bag that contained a wallet, some change, and a large clump of keys. The questioning detective removed the wallet from the bag, holding only its corners, opened it, and extracted a driver's license. "James E. Carson," he said, then turned the license so that Larson could see the photograph. Larson looked at the picture. "Bud Carson," he said. "He was the framing contractor on the house." The detective fished out a business card. "Frameworks Unlimited," he said. Larson nodded. "I had him down as Bud Carson Framers," he thought. "That's why the gray van didn't show up under his name. It must be registered under his business." "You look a little pale," the detective said to him. "I feel a little pale," Larson said, sinking into a chair next to Chris. "He wasn't who I was expecting." "Who were you expecting?" the detective asked. "That guy over there," Larson said, pointing at Mel Parker, who was being questioned by another detective. "I've been following him, thinking that he was the stalker in this case. Seems I was very, very wrong." "Don't take it too hard," the detective said. "It's happened to everybody at one time or another." "Yeah, I guess," Larson said. Al Martinez walked into the house. "Hi, John," he said. "You rang?" "Yeah," Larson replied. "We have a new suspect in the Helen Mendelsohn case. He's out on the beach, dead." He took the driver's license from the Malibu detective, holding it by its edges. A Benedict Canyon address. He held the license so that Martinez could read it. Martinez nodded. "Let's go take a look at the address," he said. "You can tell me what happened here on the way." "Give me a minute," Larson said. He turned to the Malibu detective. "You through with Mr. DeVere and Miss Callaway?" "Yeah," the detective replied. "They can go. As soon as the body's off the beach, we'll clear out of here." As he spoke, 2 ambulancemen came through the house, carrying a stretcher holding a body bag. Larson turned to Danny. Danny, will you take Chris back to my place and stay there with her until I get back? Sure, John. He gave Chris a little hug. Go on home with Danny. There's nothing to worry about anymore. I just have to clean up some details. John, Chris said, was Bud Carson admirer? Yes, Larson said. I expect to be able to prove it before morning. He looked across the room and saw that Mel Parker, holding an ice pack against the back of his neck, had finished talking to the detective. Larson crossed the room. How are you feeling? He asked. I'm okay, Parker replied, just a little sore. He pulled Parker away from the others. Listen, I owe you an apology. I thought you were mixed up in something you weren't. Is that why you've been following me? Parker asked. Yes. Well, you're not very good at it. Were you in my backyard, too? Larson blushed. I haven't got time to talk right now, but during this investigation, it's been uncovered that you've started a security business under a false name. I won't even ask how you got by the fingerprinting, but the point is, it's known to the police who you are. Are you going to arrest me? Larson shook his head. It's only a misdemeanor, and I'm not inclined to press it. If you get out of the business. You mean shut it down? I should think what you've built up is valuable enough to sell to another security business. Do that inside of, say, 3 months, and I don't think you'll hear from the police. Parker shrugged. Okay, that's fair. I'm sorry you got slugged. Believe me, it could have been worse. He went back to the Malibu detective. I'd like to borrow Carson's keys, he said. We need to have a look at his home. He's a suspect in a Beverly Hills homicide. Okay, the detective said, handing Larson the large key ring. I'll get them back to you tomorrow. He turned to Martinez. Let's go, he said. Larson followed Martinez's car back to Beverly Hills and up Benedict Canyon. Martinez slowed to look at numbers, then turned into a driveway. Larson pulled up beside him and switched off his engine. Both men got out of their cars. The house had a single light burning inside. This is an old place, Martinez said. I'll bet it goes back to the 1920s when there weren't many houses up here. I'll be interested to know how a subcontractor in the construction business, and one as young as Carson, could afford it. I'm betting on inheritance, Martinez said. Come on. They rang the doorbell, but no one answered. While Martinez held a flashlight, Larson matched a key from the ring to the front door lock, and in a moment they were inside. Looks to me as though the place has recently been remodeled, Larson said, pointing to some paint spatters on the newly refinished floor. That could explain why Carson rented the Millman guest house for a while. Could be, Martinez agreed. They continued their search of the house, finding nothing until they came to the large country kitchen. On the floor of a seating area was an Indian rug. I've got a photograph of this back at the office, Larson said, fingering the rug. He walked to a bookcase in the room and found a volume of medical photographs, and when he leafed through it, he found the photograph he was looking for. This is my man, he said. I hope the hell he's mine, Martinez replied. Let's keep looking. They combed the guest rooms, the basement, and the attic and found nothing more. I wonder what's out back, Larson said. Let's take a look. At the back door, he flipped some switches and floodlights came on behind the house. Stables, Martinez said, pointing at the building behind the house. I guess you used to be able to ride up here without worrying about traffic. The two detectives got the door unlocked and entered the building, turning on lights as they went. The stalls were still there, but the rest of the place was an extensive workshop with power tools and a workbench with many electrical tools. While Larson looked through the circuit boards and switches, Martinez looked elsewhere. Uh-oh, Martinez said. Come take a look at this. He was looking into one of the stalls. Larson walked over and looked. At the rear of the stall stood a large commercial-grade stainless steel refrigerator. It was padlocked. Larson compared the locks to the keys, selected one, and turned it in the lock, which snapped open. He stepped back. "I think I'm going to let you open it," he said. Martinez nodded and stepped forward. He lifted the lock off the hasp and set it on the floor, then took hold of the handles and opened both doors wide. Larson forced himself to look. The frozen faces of two women stared out at the detectives, their dead eyes still open, the heads sitting neatly on a steel shelf. The matching torsos were arranged on the floor of the freezer, along with the headless bodies of two mutt dogs. "For Christ's sake, close it," Larson said. Larson and Chris walked along Malibu Beach hand in hand the following afternoon. Danny was back at the house unpacking boxes that had been delivered from stores that morning. "So you see," Larson was saying, "you are involved with one of the more stupid police detectives in the Western Hemisphere." He had told her everything, but only because he knew she would find out anyway. "I'm glad you told me all of this, but it doesn't change my opinion of you in the least. I think it was most logical of you to suspect Mel Parker. After all, he did fit the bill. As far as I'm concerned, you saved my life." "No," he said firmly. "I put your life in jeopardy. A gay hairdresser saved it. You did it together. Carson might never have been caught if it hadn't been for your trap. It worked, even if not exactly as you'd planned. Why are you beating up on yourself like this? You've solved not only your stalking case, but a triple homicide as well. A serial murder, for God's sake. You should be very proud of yourself. I'm certainly proud of you." They stopped at the bottom of the stairs to the deck, and he took her in his arms. "What if I become an honest-to-God movie star?" she said. "Can you live with that?" "I'll force myself." "Are we going to argue about money?" "Probably, but hell, it's the 90s, isn't it? I guess I can learn to be a 90s man." She put her hands on his cheeks. "I can nearly see you now," she said, "but I want a good, clear look at you before I commit. After all, I can't be expected to marry a man I've never seen." He kissed her. "Get well soon," he said. Danny leaned over the patched deck railing. "Will you people stop fucking around and get up here? You expect me to do this all by myself?" Chris laughed. "Be nice, or I won't let you be my maid of honor." Danny smiled broadly. "Yeah?" "Yeah," she replied. "You can be the best man, too," Larson said. Danny affected a lisp. "Gee, that's always been my dream."